So we're moving on to the agenda to our next item. We'll be discussing Native American mascots, and we're receiving comments from Oregon federally recognized tribal governments. I believe we have somebody from the Confederated Tribe of the Siletz Indians and the Confederated Tribe of the Grand Ronde. Would you come forward? Hi there.
Hello.
Can you state your name for the record for us?
My name is Brandon Leno. I'm the tribal chairman of Grand Ronde.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate you coming today. Oh, I missed you. I saw we had two names. I just thought perhaps you were.
This is
Hi.
Lily Butler.
Lily Butler, are you, and you're a tribal member or the chair?
Council person.
Council person.
of the
Welcome.
Siletz Tribe.
Thank you. Okay. This is my first foray into having a government-to-government involvement. So I'm looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say today. Which of you would prefer to speak first?
Okay, I'm going to do a written statement, but I am Lily Butler with the Confederated Tribes of Siletz. I'm the council representative to the Tribal Education Committee. I am here today to offer the Siletz Tribe's comments on Native American mascots. The tribe urges the Board of Education to adopt the proposed administrative rule to allow Oregon's federally recognized tribes to consent to the use of school mascot as the board is required to do under Senate Bill 1509. Approving the rule ensures citizens comply with the law and that the board complies with its duty to adopt administrative rules as required by your governing policy and procedure manual. The Siletz Tribe has carefully reviewed your November 20th, 2015 draft resolution and December 10th, 2015 administrative rule summary regarding the Native American mascot. The resolution speaks to the board's desire to prevent cultural inaccurate images and portrayals of Native Americans and to be culturally sensitive. However, when the Siletz Tribe, tribal members, non-tribal members of the Siletz community, and the students who attend the Siletz Valley Charter School tell you that our warrior name and mascot are a source of pride seeped in history to the Siletz Tribe and the recognition of all veterans as warriors, you chose to mischaracterize us as being well-meaning but offensive in our actions. That is an inaccurate portrayal of our community, and we are offended by your insensitivity. Your resolution points out a widening achievement gap for Native Americans. Are you intending to lay the cause for this on Native American mascots? Our warrior mascot does not create a negative school environment, but poverty and inadequate funding most certainly do. If the board is sincere about addressing this gap, we invite you to turn your efforts towards helping our community get a state of an art school with adequate funding for administration, educators, equipment, and other supportive materials. The board's administrative rule summary states that it is unknown whether any Native American mascot can meet the requirements under the exception granted by the rule amendment because the board has not received any draft agreements. It is incredible that you make this assertion knowing that agreements must comply with a rule which you have failed to adopt. Your assertion seems to only support and justify your inaction or failure to comply with the legislative directives and take shots at our ability to decide for ourselves as a tribal community what is good for us, what supports us, and what undermines our self-esteem and identity. The board's resolution and rules summary make repeated reference to the negative impacts on biased, derogatory, or inflammatory mascots based on various studies and report. The tribe agrees that there can be mascots that are derogatory and offensive, but that is not how the warrior mascot is portrayed at the Siletz Valley Charter School. Recently, the board invited Dr. Noor, members of the Board of Education, members of our local school board, and the local school representative to an event at the Sluts Valley Charter School to provide a first-hand experience of our annual Veterans Powwow and the role of the warrior mascot. Only the members of our local school board and state representative attended. Dr. Noor, Anthony Velez, and Lindsay Capps notified us of scheduling conflicts, but the remaining board members did not respond. The board missed an opportunity to see for themselves how the mascot positively impacts SLED students and the community. The tribe has attempted in good faith to participate in political process to keep our warrior mascot. We believe that Senate Bill 1509 achieved an outcome consistent with the board's intent and ensured our school mascot continued as a symbol of cultural, community, school, and individual pride. The board steadfast resolved to maintain your original position despite evidence to the contrary is disturbing. Refusing to consider the Sluts tribe perspectives as valid and dismiss us as misguided is parentalistic and offensive. We view the delay in adopting the rule as a dereliction of duty. We wonder if having the Sluts tribe and its representatives testify repeatedly as another member of the public has relegated the tribe to a lesser status in the eyes of the Board of Education. The Sluts tribe wants you to understand we are not a member of the public. We are a sovereign, federally recognized Indian tribe of which the state of Oregon has a formal government-to-government relationship. We expect the board to treat us as such. By separate letter, the tribe has requested that the Board of Education formally consult with us on the proposed rule as required by Oregon law. Next week, all of Oregon's 9 tribes will convene at Canyonville, Oregon for an annual Tribal Government-to-Government Summit. At this meeting, tribal and the state of Oregon leaders and staff will review our progress in promoting positive government-to-government relationships. We have not experienced that through our involvement in the mascot issue. We believe that the forthcoming consultation with the board will address this situation and look forward to the meeting with the board. Some of the, I had been here at one of the hearings, but we have students that had sent a letter out to the board on their mascot. But I wanted to show you some of the things that goes on with student pride at the school. And these are my grandson's jackets. They have just purchased the jackets. The boys are involved in wrestling, baseball, and football at the school. And doing that, they have to keep their grades up. And their absenteeism has to be, the coaches are checking continually on all that. This here is in the 11th grade, and this here is a 10th grade. This other sweatshirt, our grandson attended the Sluts school from K through 10, and then he graduated from high school from Nick Galway, Umatilla School. He is now in his second year at Oregon Institute of American Indian Arts. The boy that went to the 10th grade, he went from kindergarten to the 10th grade at Siletz, and there were 11 students all the way through. Every one of the students are either working or in college. So there is, and you know, they're very proud of the school, and as you can see, very proud of the mascot that is portrayed at Siletz. And I would, I think when I talked before, you know, if the schools are having problems with the mascots, then it's time to meet with the superintendents of our different districts and let them know that how their students are to act when they're meeting with the schools that do have the mascots. And what's happening is really too bad, because last year we were at a wrestling tournament, and there were over 20-some schools, but the young people that had the warrior mascot, and they're not all tribal. They're students that attend their schools with the mascots, and very proud of what they're wearing. And in the community of Siletz, they're not all what I'm showing you is tribal member, but they're not all tribal member. And we do have the parents wearing the sweatshirts of whether it be their students or football or just members of the community. They're wearing something that shows the mascot. Oh, and one of the parents sent this. This is a graduation cap of one of the grandchildren. Grandchild is working and going to college.
Thank you so much.
First of all, I'd like to thank you for having us here today. I'd like to acknowledge Lily in this position as Siletz. I, too, have a written statement, then I will have other comments. My name is Ren Lino, and I'm Tribal Council Chairman with the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. I've sat on our council for over 20 years. As a sovereign nation, the tribe has worked hard to build positive government-to-government relationships across all levels of government. We have done so on federal, state, and local levels, including with our local school districts. We are deeply troubled by the State Board of Education disregard for our sovereignty and your passivity when it comes to ending racism against Oregon Native people and requiring that schools in Oregon teach our history. The rule before you is a bad one. It is unresponsive to the needs of the tribe and our tribal members. If passed, the proposed rule would pit our neighboring communities against us. It is the board that made this decision of outright ban. But the reality is that communities in which these schools are located have a perception that we are the ones that are promoting this policy. This kind of confusion is a deterrent to the positive relationships that we have built over time with our communities, and this is why we have committed to work with legislators to come up with a solution that benefits tribes, our communities, and our local school districts. The proposed rule improperly limits tribal determinations of when a mascot is culturally significant to a tribe by stating that a mascot cannot be culturally significant if it doesn't contain the proper name of the tribe. This is highly offensive, and we believe outside the board's regulatory authority. Why would the State Board of Education not trust tribal governments to do the right thing in determining what is and what is not culturally appropriate with respect to the mascot? Why would you not have faith in federal recognized sovereign Indian tribe to make these decisions? The Confederate Tribes Grand Ronde, along with Oregon tribes, prefer a solution that would allow schools to keep with their native mascots if they collaborate with a representative tribe on a positive portrayal and integrative culture studies in school curriculum to combat stereotyping. The history of Oregon did not start with the arrival of Lewis and Clark. It was occurring for thousands of years before they set foot on our land. And many of those Indians, braves, warriors, chiefs, are worthy of being honored at high school mascots. High school mascots are supposed to be inspirational. High schools do not usually adopt derogatory figures or say slogans. They adopt admirable and inspirational figures. The band's names, Indian Braves, Warriors, and Chiefs, can be inspirational, and we do not generally view these use as derogatory. There are 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon. The history of our people who have lived in Oregon since in time immemorial covers the breadth of the state, and either ignored or briefly mentioned in our schools. Most of Oregon students learn more about other tribes, the Plains Indians, the East Coast. They do not hear about the Umpqua, Molalla, Rogue River, Kalapuya, or Shasta Indians, or other tribes that were here in Oregon. If more Oregonians were educated about tribal history, society, and culture, it would do much more to solve the problem attributed to Indian mascots than this simply outlawing their use. The Confederated Tribes Grand Round, along with other Oregon tribes, prefer a solution that would allow schools to keep their native mascots with collaborative or representative tribes on positive portrayals and integrate cultural studies. We believe strongly that there is an issue that is best resolved with efforts from tribal governments and their local communities. We have worked with the Willamina School District to make sure they accurately and respectfully portray Native culture. We have been able to work at the local level to dispel negativity, stereotypes, and foster an environment of respect and sensitivity to our tribal studies and all students and our tribal citizens and citizens within the shared communities. The key to our relationship with all the levels of government in the future is through education outreach. We would recommend to the State Board of Education that we move past this issue to something that truly could make a difference for the benefit of tribes and all Oregonians. Let's take a strong look at the teaching of the Oregon students about history and culture with Oregon's 9 unique sovereign governments. And instead of spending hundreds of thousands of dollars ripping up gym floors across the state of Oregon, let's put the money where it matters most, towards the education of our children. That is my written statement, but I'd also like to comment. We have a respect for everybody's opinion on this mascot issue. We're not blind to that. But I will say, and Slets would share this, for termination tribes, we know the history of what went on. We were told in 1954 we weren't even Indians. Well, we still lived as Indians. So we not only lived with the idea that people didn't like Native Americans, we lived with the idea our government didn't even recognize us as Native Americans, but we held them cultures together. That's why we're still here as tribes. So when people think that we don't recognize them, but what we look forward to is what's best for our kids. We don't look back to hold grudges. We look forward for what's best to our kids. If we have education in our schools about the 9 tribes, maybe we won't even have a mascot issue to deal with 10 years from now, 20 years from now. So we're here for the solution, not to get even. So for me, and I've lived at Grand Round all my life. I was 5 years old when we were terminated. I lived there as an Indian for 30 years, and our government, he wouldn't even recognize us. I served in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. They called me an Indian. I held that with respect. I didn't think it was derogatory. I felt it as an honor. Everybody else was named by their name. I was the Indian. I was the chief, they would call me. I held that with respect. It was not disrespect. So for me, I think these should be in the hands of the tribes. Who knows this is our history. This is our culture. We have done a great deal to recover this. Who would speak better about this than us? So for me, we need to put this in the hands of the tribes. We are the ones that know our history. We are the ones that know our culture. And we are not sitting and doing nothing. I am very proud to be the chairman of a tribe. I've seen our scholarship program go from 3 to now we give scholarships to almost every kid that wants to go to school. But we're not just sitting and doing nothing. We've created our own curriculum. We have a 4th grade curriculum we've already working with. We are currently working with the Willamina School District, Sheridan School District, the Dallas School District, the Springfield School District, the McMinnville School District, the Independent School District, the Salem-Keizer District, the Beaverton School District, the Molalla, the Eugene, and the Marcola School Districts to try and get the curriculum into their schools. We are also working on the issue of the schools that have warriors within our treaty lands, and that's important for tribes. And we are working currently with the Amity School District, the Lebanon School District, the Marcola School District, We also are working with, we need to reach out to Molalla. We just had a meeting with banks. So we are not sitting and doing nothing. We are not just expecting this not to happen. Put it in your hands. We will take on our responsibility. And I'm not here representing, I just think it's important also. I don't sit here before you as one single person that belong to an organization as a group. I sit here representing 5,300 and some people. 1,800 of them are school kids. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have Mr. Capps from the governor's office. Would you like to engage in the discussion as well, or are you just listening today?
My presence here is as an observer.
Okay.
This is a process of the board, but I am certainly here to honor the government to come out arrangement and agreement that we have with the 9 sovereign tribes and federally recognized tribes in the state. So appreciate the opportunity to be here to observe your testimony and observe your conversation as a state board, and appreciate the board making time to have this formal consultation and pursuing further consultation as needed.
Okay. I understand there's ongoing discussion with at least one tribe in the governor's office. Is that right?
I think there's been a request that there is a subsequent conversation with all tribes that wish to engage in that consultation.
Great. Well, I want to open it up to the board. Is there any discussion that we'd like to have at this time? We have some people here that feel fortunate to have this perspective. So we have many, many people also to hear from after this as well. Is there anything that the two of you would like to add? Oh, sorry. Don.
So I'm on the Oregon School Activities Association board, and I would just say that I have received multiple letters from some of the folks that have Indian mascots, community members, asking that those mascots, as you two talked about, be communicated, and some sort of relationship between the school district and the sovereign tribes be allowed to take place. So you ask from the field out there, and I know that you talked about, they're very proud of their mascots, whether they're up on the wall or ingrained in those wood floors, or I've received some of the same testimony that we've heard right here.
I do have a comment. I think if this rule would move forward, I think it would be a step back for us for all the work that we've done with the local schools. I think there's a lot of interest in Native American people today. I think that basically, if we have an opportunity, we need to look for a win-win situation. What do? You make a few people happy because there's no more mascot, or do we have an opportunity to educate the Oregonians? And like I said, if basically you educate the kids, and that's why we started with the 4th grade curriculum, if we can educate them why tribes have the right to have their own laws, have their own constitution, have their own courts, own police stations, if we can educate people on that issue, maybe we don't have a mascot issue.
Councilwoman Butler, I had a question about your mascot. Do you know who created the art for it?
No, I don't. We had talked about it, and Slets has been there for a long time. And we had a council member who's no longer with us that graduated from the school, and I don't know, he must have been about 75. So we had one of the staff people trying to do a research on that when the mascot started, and
Goes back.
way back.
Thanks. Any additional questions or comments? Okay. Well, thank you so much both for coming. We appreciate this meeting. So we're moving on to public comment on the Native American mascots issue now. Seadom Edmo, I think, is what I'm reading.
Yeah, they said they sent it.
Hi.
Hi.
If you can state your name for the record, and we're trying to limit comments to 3 minutes.
All right, I will do my best.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can time. My name is Siadam Edmo. I'm Shoshone Bannock Nez Person Yakima, and I'm the president of the Oregon Indian Education Association. And I'm here today to clarify our position on Senate Bill 1509, as well as the proposed rule that you all have before you. So we actually came out 3 years ago in support of Senate Bill 1509, and we're a part of the working group that was developed from it, primarily for the reason that it does two things well. One, that it recognizes individual student civil rights within the classroom not to be discriminated against. And secondly, because it worked to also balance that with tribal cultural property rights to determine how they would like to carry forward their image. We saw it as in line with the National Congress of American Indians position on the use of mascots in NCAA and NIEA's position as well. So those are the clarifications that I wanted to make about our position in particular. It hasn't been easy at OIEA and in Oregon since 2012. It's been definitely difficult to live out some of these differences in opinions, but our position is that the psychology, where opinions may be one thing, the psychology behind what happens when Native students are exposed to Indian mascots really hasn't shaken at all. And we haven't seen one psychological study into the use of mascots that says that it's necessarily positive for Native students. And as a mom, that for me, who has children, young school-age children who play sports, I don't want my children exposed to Indian mascots. So we support the draft rule as it sits before you today. I do have an additional PowerPoint. I mean, context is important. Today in 2015, at the end of 2015, we sit at a very different time than we did back in 2012, right? We've seen the National Congress of American Indians ramp up their campaign against the use of harmful sports mascots. So 2/3 of the Indian mascot references disappear from schools across the nation. So recognizing that we're in a very different place now than we were 3 years ago, and applaud the board for continuing to look at this issue in a way that both honors tribal sovereign cultural property rights as well as student civil rights in the classroom. I also have a prepared written testimony that I'll give.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
thanks.
Jerry Washburn?
Thank you. Members of the board, I want to thank you for this. My name is Gary Washburn. I'm the superintendent of schools for Roseburg Public Schools, and I am brand new to Oregon as of June. So I've spent most of my career in New Mexico. I want to thank you for this opportunity to provide public input on the proposed rule regarding Native American mascots. My predecessors have offered testimony and public comment on this issue on numerous occasions, and I know the board's well acquainted with Roseburg Public Schools' desire to retain its mascot. I have worked with various tribes in my previous positions in New Mexico, and I know that relationships between Native populations and their surrounding communities can be marred by historically accumulated conflict and distrust. This is not the case in Roseburg. The Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians and Roseburg Public Schools have a long history of working together for the betterment of children in the community, and it's important to us that that continue. Roseburg Public Schools' concern with the proposed rule is twofold. First, the rule as proposed does not allow Roseburg Public Schools to continue the work it is engaged in with the Cow Creek Tribe to resolve this issue in a manner that is mutually agreeable to both parties as required by the statute. Roseburg Public Schools have been consistently at the forefront of this issue. We have worked earnestly with the Cow Creek Tribe to address this issue in a respectful manner. As a part of that work, we long ago replaced our Native American representation of a mascot with a feather. Our emphasis throughout this process has consistently been to emphasize the positive aspects of our mascot. I will not dispute that past practices and images were disrespectful and in poor taste. Those images and practices are long gone. Additionally, the OSAA has put rules and regulations in place to ensure that cheering in support of sports teams is done in a positive and culturally sensitive manner. Our staff and coaches work hard to ensure that our student body exemplifies the tenets espoused by those rules. Our other concern in this rule is, as proposed, it does not reflect the statute as written. The rule as written reflects a request to narrow the scope of the rule to reflect opposition to the use of Native American mascots. This opposition is based on the belief that the use of Native American mascots harms Native children. Opponents of Native American mascots have placed a great deal of emphasis on Dr. Stephanie Freiberg's research on the possible negative implications of the use of a Native American mascot. Dr. Freiberg's findings are drawn from 5 separate qualitative studies with a total sample population of 740 people, of which 389 were Native American. 5 qualitative studies with sample sizes ranging from 71 to 214 is neither comprehensive nor compelling. The evidence is far from clear that harm is being done to Native children by Native American mascots, particularly where the imagery is positive or neutral, as is the case in Roseburg. Reflective of this, the Oregon legislature worked with the 9 tribes to draft and pass legislation ensuring that Native children are not impacted negatively by Native American mascots. We believe that our local tribe and our community can and should make this determination for our children, children that we are directly responsible for. The rule as proposed does not reflect the spirit or the intent of the statute. Rules adopted by this board should reflect the legislation as written. To do anything else exceeds the authority of the board and dishonors all who worked hard to put this legislation in place. Thank you.
Jennifer Walter.
And please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I
Item
have.
passes.
My name is Jennifer Walter, and I am a retired attorney and school teacher. I'm going to be speaking to you primarily with my legal hat on. I think that you should adopt the rules with 3 changes. I think that 1509 was wrong, but I think you can have the best outcome by adopting the rules. The 3 changes that I would like, one is to the resolution, and that is to include a whereas clause that recognizes that there are Native American Oregonians who have come to you and told you that they find them offensive, find Indian mascots offensive. The second 2 changes, one is to change so that the nicknames Redskins and Savages are not permitted. I don't think you want to be associated with that. The third change is the most important one. I think that you need to have a rule that makes it clear that you're approving a tribal mascot, not a racial mascot. And my concern is that Oregon schools have generally used a Plains Indian image rather than an image from a Northwest tribe. So I'm concerned about that. I'm going to tell you, that's what I think you should do. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do.
You have about a minute left.
Okay? If you adopt the rule, as I've suggested, I'll go to the legislature and, when appropriate, explain that it's the right rule. If you don't do what I ask, then I'm going to go to court, because this is a race-based law and it's unconstitutional under the Equal Protection Clause. And I'm just committed to this. It may seem strange that I feel so strongly about this, but I'm willing to do that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Craig Dorsey?
And please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Craig Dorsey. I'm the tribal attorney for Siletz, have been for over 25 years, but I'm here on my own. I wasn't sure Councilwoman Butler was going to show up, so I don't need to repeat her comments, but I just have a couple observations I think might be useful. No one doubts that there's a Native American achievement gap, and that really needs to be addressed. I just don't see, this seems like a feel-good measure to say you're doing something about it, but not doing anything substantive. I think addressing the programs and services to Native Americans would accomplish a lot more than fooling around with a mascot, although it's kind of an unfunded mandate in some ways because the rules require cultural awareness programs as part of an agreement. The Siletz tribe, fortunately, provides all those with its own funds at the Siletz Valley Charter School, language, culture, crafts. One of the things I would point out, when I looked at the staff report, it talks about the dropout rate for Native American high school students. But for Siletz, when I first started representing them, their school was on a downward spiral. First they lost their high school, then they lost their middle school, and then they were going to close their elementary school. And they sent all the students from Siletz to Toledo. That's where the dropout rate soared. I don't have the exact figures, but I think it was close to 50% of Siletz tribal member students were dropping out once their community school was abandoned or destroyed. So you look at the dropout rate in your table, and it's still high, 11%. But it actually is probably something like an 800% improvement in the dropout rate when their school was taken away from them. So now they've got the school and they have the programs, and the dropout rate has substantially dropped. One of the things I would also think about looking at, perhaps, is obviously all school districts have shortage of funds, budget problems. That's been an ongoing problem across Oregon. But it looks to me, in my experience at Siletz, that when there is a budget shortfall and positions have to be cut or programs have to be cut, I'd be interested to know whether those cuts happen disproportionately to Native American or other minority schools. That would be useful information to me, because it always seems like those are the first ones that are cut. And the Siletz Valley School was only reinstated when the tribe organized it as a charter school, put it back in the community, and funds it to make up, because obviously they only receive 80% of the funding that other schools do under the charter statute. They fund it and support it now, and it is thriving, and it's fun to watch the students succeed there. So just a couple observations. Thanks.
Jacqueline Keeler?
Hi. Hi, my name is Jacqueline Keeler, and I am a parent I have 2 children in Oregon schools, and I am also the president of the Hillsborough Title VII Indian Education Program in Hillsborough. And I'm also a founder of Eradicating Offensive Native Mascotry, a national Native organization that fights the promotion of stereotypes of Native people. And so I would like to say, as a Native parent here in Oregon, I feel like I've had misgivings about SB. Let me get this up here. SB 1509, because it basically takes away any voice that Native parents like myself have on this issue. We are not represented by one of the 9 Oregon tribes, yet I am a citizen of the Navajo Nation, and also my father is Yankton Dakota Sioux. And the culture that is mostly mascoted is my father's culture, the Dakota culture, with the Plains Indian war bonnets, these things that are very sacred to my family. And I myself I was given by my uncle a feather headdress that's been in my family for over 100 years, and this was a great honor, and I am a keeper of a headdress. And so I often feel like asking Oregon tribes about how to deal with the mascoting of my culture is like asking Italians what they think of the Viking mascot. It's not their culture that's being mascoted. And so it's, I mean, you talk about the Viking mascot, it's not Italian sovereignty that is at stake. That's a total misframing of the issue, and all of these schools, Molalla, Rogue River, even other tribal schools are using Plains culture. They're mascoting our culture.
You have about a minute left.
Okay, so, if these particular tribes are happy with being mascoted, then the mascoting should be specific to their culture, in their language, using terms that will not in any way implicate my children or my culture. And the imagery has to be completely from their culture. If they want to be mascots, that's their choice. But they cannot sign off on the mascoting of my own culture. And I wanted a recent study came out in March, and from the University of Buffalo, and what they found was that it said that that American Indian nicknames and mascots are not neutral symbols, and that their continued use by schools, professional sports teams, and other organizations has negative consequences for everyone, not just Native Americans. What they found was that the research, which used predominantly white participants, has shown that American Indian mascots activate negative but not positive stereotypes. Studies show that regardless of their intention, these mascots do not honor American Indians, but instead bring to mind negative thoughts associated with them as a group of people. Furthermore, other studies with mostly white samples have found that people exposed to American Indian mascots are more likely to negatively stereotype other ethnic groups as well. So positive representation of American Indians in popular culture are scarce. And we're basically only known as mascots. It would be like as if white men were only known as Vikings. And there was never a movie, there was never a TV show, there was no white man shown in any other way except as a Viking. This is our reality. And there is no balance to this. We are basically just mascots, and it masks our real lives. And for my children, I want more than that. I want them to be seen as people, as human beings, and I don't want them to have to fight this fight. It's not our job to educate people. I mean, there are 2,000 Native American high schools with Native American mascots in the country. Imagine if that was the case for the African American community. That'd be 20,000 high schools in the country with African American mascots. Why doesn't that exist? And you have to ask yourself, what kind of burden are you putting on the Native American community? Native American parents like myself, we're just trying to work to help our kids succeed, go to soccer practice. I don't have time to educate people on this issue, and yet I have to make the time. And so I do think that this directive from the legislature should include the voice of Native American parents and students like myself who are not represented by Oregon tribes, and we are the majority. And so you're basically depriving us of a voice in this issue when you turn to Oregon tribes when it's not even their cultures that are being mascoted. That's all. Thank you.
Ruth Jensen. You can state your name for the record and try to limit your comments to 3 minutes.
I'm going to put my timer on.
I will give you a reminder when you have
Okay.
a minute left.
Okay. My name is Ruth Jensen. I'm a member and enrolled member and citizen of the Tlingit Nation. I want to thank you all for this opportunity to speak. I'm an Oregonian. I was an educator for 10 years, both times with Indian education. I worked for 10 years serving tribal nations throughout the Northwest. And what changed my mind on this was when I heard Shea Butler speak. And this was a turning point for me. And I learned about how mascots are used not only by the school itself, but opposing schools, where they say, kill the Indians, scalp the Indians. So this is what our students are exposed to. I think the law is fundamentally flawed because it's based on giving over to tribal nations their decisions for, let's see. So tribal nations have jurisdiction over their own members. And as we heard, Grand Ronde has about 5,000. 16 or 1,800 of them are American Indians. Well, there are more students represented in all of the school districts which have Indian mascots. And I'm going to reiterate what was just said earlier, that because of the way this law and rule are written, it does take our voice away.
I have about a minute left.
Okay. Mascots are objects. Indian mascots, race-based mascots, are objectifying a whole race. We want to create a safe learning environment. So at the bottom, besides all of the concerns that were already stated, we want a safe learning environment for all students. And the American Psychological Association said, 20 years ago, that race-based or Indian mascots are detrimental to all students. And as we heard in the previous speaker, that's been substantiated in scientific study. I just want to end by saying I'm grateful that we're having this conversation. I'm grateful that it's raising awareness about the gaps, the educational gaps, and I'm baffled that a law has passed that is fundamentally flawed. And I'm also weary that we're still talking about this in 2015, where Indian people are being objectified, stereotyped. And I'm also encouraged that this is raising awareness about the educational disparities and the need for education about our history, not only our history, but also we as contemporary people. So I will end by saying, no, please, no mascots objectifying Indian people. Thank you.
Thank you. Jill Weber and Russ Bolin.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Jill Weber. I'm principal at Roseburg High School. I have been an educator for 26 years in Roseburg School District, and I'm a graduate of Roseburg High School. And as you know, we do go by Roseburg Indians. We're very proud of that. And we are the winner of the OSAA 6A Sportsman of the Year. And that's not because of derogatory or disrespect, but it's because of the pride that we hold around our mascot. I want to share with you some ways that we continue to build and work with our tribes in our area. I'm going to speak to how we educate our younger children, and Russ will build on that as the work we've done around high school. In my 26 years as an educator in Roseburg, I was principal at Eastwood Elementary, and we were blessed with 43 acres of an outdoor area. And in that outdoor area, we have a plank house where we're able to bring in Native American storytellers and experts who work with us to educate our children, all children in Roseburg Public Schools, around Native Americans, around the history, the respect, the traditions that are there, and the use of natural resources and the history. Bringing in people from the tribe to help support that continues our growth around the education and understanding. We're very proud of the work that we continue to do with the tribe and are learning to ensure that we are respectful with that mascot.
Thank you. I'm Russ Bolin. I, too, am a graduate of Roseburg High School, teacher, coach, and I've been the athletic director for the last 10 years. I've been there 26 years as well at Roseburg. I believe we've done an excellent job, and this did not start for us in 2012. This started for us about 25 years ago. With my predecessors in the athletic office, they sat down with our local tribe and said, tell us what you want us to do, and to be in order to be respectful. That's when we made the change from the imagery to the feather as our logo. And at this point in time, we have no imagery at our school, on our uniforms, any apparel that we sell. And we've gone as far as sending out letters to companies that send us fundraising items and apparel, trying to give it away so, they can make money and stuff. We've had to send letters from our lawyers to cease and desist with some of those companies because they were misrepresenting what we stand for and misrepresenting our local tribe. And all those changes came about with us sitting down and having those conversations with the Cattle Creek Band of Umpqua Indians. In my 26 years involved with Roseburg High School, I've never witnessed any disrespectful acts towards us when we're playing in competitions or when we're at events. It doesn't happen anymore. There's rules that prohibit those things from happening. And if they would crop up, and it's a simple conversation and they cease and desist very quickly. But like I said, I've never seen that. Over the years. I believe that the rules set forth from this board should reflect the legislation that has been written and passed by our state leaders so we can continue this work with our community school and represent our local tribe in a positive manner. If we can sit down and have conversations locally centered on the past legislation and come to an agreement, that should satisfy all the stakeholders. We have a fantastic relationship with our local tribe, and we wish to continue that and having those conversations, which we've had over the past 25 years and continue to have those. Thank you.
We support the intent of the Senate bill. However, we think that the rules are too narrow and exclude us from those conversations, and we would like you to reconsider that and to look at, we want to continue building those relationships and be able to represent our tribe and our area respectfully. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Jupe.
I know he's here. He may be in the hall.
You can go.
I know he is.
Thank you, Sloan.
Sure.
The State Board of Education adopted the Indian Education Program, Indian Education Plan. So that's already been adopted by this board previously, so that we will be getting more education in the public school. And secondly, more than just,
So Miranda, so Stephen is trying to take care of something in his district. So can we move on to the next person and get back to him later?
Johnny Lake.
Hello, everybody. Board, State Board.
Howdy.
Thank you very much. Opportunity to come visit with you. The weather is horrible. Thank you for a few minutes. I'm one of the facilitators who worked with the tribes and the community and the schools on this issue. And I just want to encourage you to continue the work of trying to work with a multicultural community. When we were separated in segregation, it was pretty easy to talk about these things because we only had to talk about it within our community. But now that we have all of our children in the same schools, it's really important we recognize we want them to have a multicultural lens, not a monocultural lens. And so when we talk about Native identity, I'm here because I have 9 grandchildren that are all Native American, registered in the tribes from here all the way to Alaska. And these images, well, not one of them has said yes to mascots, so that's my in-house vote. And all the other children that I work with in schools, I've not met children who agree that mascots are acceptable to them. And this is elementary, middle, and high school. Here's a quote from Brian Kladowski, President of the National Congress of American Indians, 2014. While our nations may be old, our people are disproportionately young. Nearly 42% of Native people are under the age of 24. Native youth are also disproportionately vulnerable. Many grow up in communities where jobs are scarce or even non-existent, where classrooms lack basic essentials. That's why the mockery of Native celebrations and dress in the name of sportsmanship is not just offensive, but insidious, because it asks us to accept the denigration of our heritage. It erodes our children's sense of self, and that is simply unacceptable. Representations are powerful. In fact, images are shorthands for reality. What reality are we communicating when we say that this is what Native Americans are today in this 21st century?
You have a minute left.
And so this idea that this is the identity of a whole group of people that are very diverse and very multicultural is reducing them to a historical representation. The 2 men who started boarding school says we have to kill the Indian in order to save the man. And they were not talking about physically kill someone. They were talking about stripping their culture and taking it away from them. And so when we talk about Native American culture, it is a multicultural community, not one community. And so when we look at this, I would encourage you as a board to recognize that this is a complex issue and a very difficult issue, but one that gives us practice for probably larger issues to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Lahui Cup, maybe? Cup? Ep? Huh? Oh.
Sorry, at the table. Hello, my name's Lahui White Bear Cup. I'm a member of the Coastal Band of the Chumash Nation. I'm here representing myself as an Indigenous woman and as a mother. I'm also here to partially represent my brother Shea Butler, who is a member of the Siletz tribes. And Shea and I brought this matter to you all back in 2006 is when this discussion started at the ODE level. And I just want to thank you all for continuing the conversation from that point and hearing a variety of voices throughout the years. And here we are, how many years later, having this conversation. There's a couple of points I wanted to make. One of them has to do with the power of imagery, which was just spoke about, and how that is very impactful. I view the Native imagery and mascotry as it is a big deal. Like, a lot of people are like, this isn't a big deal. We have other things to worry about. Let's talk about all these other things that we have going on, like health and education access and poverty and homelessness. But until we're viewed as a living, breathing people, our other issues won't matter. They won't be addressed as long as we're locked as a stereotypical image of the past. And I think that's important to remember. And that was part of why this journey began in the first place. I do have concern with schools that limit their interactions to tribes that are based only upon imagery and mascots. To me, that's kind of a slap in the face of the true meaning of respect, because if you really respect a community, you should be doing this work regardless of if you have an image or a mascot. And that kind of feels hurtful to me to hear people saying, oh, because we have a mascot, this is why we're doing this work, or we have this image. It should happen anyways out of respect. You're on their ancestral lands, and that's what it's about. Somebody talked about the psychological harm because of rival schools. Some things may be said or may not be said on the games, on the courts, but things happen outside as well at the schools that may not be heard about. Somebody may be saying things like that that people don't hear because students will say things outside of the ears of their teachers and principals and coaches all the time. So they may be saying things like, we're going to go kill the Indians, you know what I mean? And not realizing what the words they're saying really mean and the implications they have. And should another student hear that is Native, that is very harmful psychologically to them. It hurts them. Also, I wanted to talk about the absorption of culture. When people pull in these images and say we're the whatever the team is and say we've been this for X amount of years, how do you think that makes a person feel that is from that culture? We've been this culture forever. It is our culture. You can't say we're the Indians, we've been the Indians for 100 years. You're not the true representation of the people of these lands. And absorbing that into a dominant culture just promotes that dominance and it reinforces it. And that is also harmful.
I have about a minute left.
Thank you. And I heard somebody mention cost earlier, and this keeps coming up as well. And I'd be curious to know how many schools really are going to take advantage of, Adidas offer. And I think that's important to note that they did offer to pay for all the redesigns and all the uniforms and everything for schools that are changing. So I don't see that as a big of a concern point at this point, since they did make that offer publicly, and that would save the schools quite a bit of money. So again, I would like to just reiterate that it's about respect. It's about being viewed with dignity and viewed as a people of this time, not as a people of the past. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen Jupe.
She said she was reading the gap there. Trying to close down the school district. You can't get the buses moving. So my name is Stephen Jupe. I'm superintendent of Scappoose School District. And I'm going to be very brief. The reason I have an interest in this is that we do use a Native American mascot, and my district has for a long time. And I've spoken to the state board before, but ironically at that time I was in the Dalles, and so it was another Native American mascot. I view this as a huge opportunity for my district to continue a tradition that it has had for a long time, yes, to renew a relationship with a Native American Confederation group with the Grand Ronde, and to renew and reinvigorate the opportunities for education for our students. And that is my primary thrust. I was on the committee, and I've met and worked with several of the people behind me, and it was a privilege to work with them, and I wish to continue that privilege. I frankly am a little worried that if this all goes away, that vacuum will be a vacuum. And I think this is a rich part of the history of Oregon. Yes, it is history, but history makes me what we are now and where we move towards our vision for the future. And right now, I don't want to see that disappear. So my thrust is educational, relationship, and it would be a great privilege to be able to move forward with the Grand Ronde Nation to create an agreement, a treaty, so that we could actually enrich our students. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. This concludes the public comment period on the Native American mascots issue, and we'll move forward to the staff presentation on the same matter. Hello, ladies. You each have 3 minutes to. No.
Sweet, sweet. Nice. Have a half-hour
We'll get it
discussion.
done.
Okay.
Jessica always kind of seizes up when I make a joke, I think.
My name is Cindy Hunt, the Government and Legal Affairs Manager here at the Department of Education, and I have with me today
April Campbell, Indian Education Specialist,
Okay.
the Deputy Superintendent.
Okay. You've heard a lot today about the multi-faceted conversation and opinions and beliefs about this topic. Today before you, I'm going to go over briefly how we got here today, what the changes in the rules are, and a bit about the resolution. And also some of the work that the department's done since you last heard this topic. So you may recall, back in the spring of this year, or rather back in 2014, the legislature adopted Senate Bill 1509, which, while it did not overturn the board's original ban, it did direct the board to adopt rules relating to agreements between school districts and tribes. It also specifically said that a district was allowed to enter into an agreement with an Oregon federally recognized Native American tribe to use a mascot that represents, is associated with, or is significant to the tribe. And that these agreements, to be valid, must be adopted by the board. The board was also directed to adopt these rules by January 1st, 2017. The original ban goes into effect July 1, 2017. So that's one of the reasons for the timing. The other aspect of Senate Bill 1509 that was discussed by the legislature was comparing it to the National Collegiate Athletic Association, NCAA, and its policy on mascots, which does allow some universities to keep their Native American mascots if they're based on a particular tribe and have a formal permission to do so by the respective tribes. So in conversations with individual board members, some of you expressed a desire to narrow the rules that were in front of you back in May. You may recall that back in May, when the rules were presented to you, you rejected those rules. So we set about narrowing them and yet keeping them within Senate Bill 1509. And so Senate Bill 1509, like I said, had a very specific language in it about that the agreement had to be with a Native American tribe whose mascot represented them or is associated with or significant to the tribe. So what the narrowing of the rules does is that it defines more specifically what that is. And very specifically, it says that to fall under that exception, that the tribe, the specific tribe that's entering into the agreement, has to determine that the mascot represents them specifically in the agreement. That the proper name of the particular tribe or the proper name of a tribe that is part of a confederation of tribes entering into the agreement was included in the name of the mascot on January 1, 2013. That date was picked because that was the original date that all the districts with mascots were supposed to report to the Department of Education. And that the public school where the mascot is used is located within the traditional area of interest of the tribe that enters into the agreement. That language, we consulted with the Indian Affairs Commission because there's been an expression of concern from the beginning when we were talking about the rules. This certainly came up in the work group a couple of times, is around forum shopping or something by school districts. And so we wanted to narrow down, where that school district could go to seek a tribe to enter into an agreement with. So this language of traditional area of interest we got from the Indian Affairs Commission. So when we looked at these three criteria, we believe that there are only 3 school districts from the original 15 that could potentially qualify to enter into an agreement with the tribe. And those 3 school districts would be the Siletz School District, the Molalla, and the Rogue River School District. Because all 3 of those districts have the names of a tribe or part of the Confederation of Tribes on January 1, 2013. Those school districts are also located, we believe, within a traditional area of interest of 1 or more tribes. Now, in the docket item, I want to clarify this. I wrote that we did not know whether or not these schools would be able to enter into agreement or would be able to qualify. And the reason for that was because none of these school districts have entered into a formal agreement that we're aware of that would meet the qualifications of 1509 and the rules yet. Okay. Let's see. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to April a little bit to talk about some of the comments that you've been hearing since the last time this was in front of the board and some of the activities that you've been doing.
Sure. So I'm not going to repeat what you heard this morning from the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde or the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. But it was interesting, a couple of my just informal meetings with a couple of the tribes felt like this rule had put them in a kind of a rock and a hard place if they were neutral, because then if a school district came to them and they decided not to participate, then there was going to be some consequences there. But if they did, they really didn't want to. So those were a couple comments that I did receive. I think I haven't spoken with a tribe that hasn't supported the government, the sovereignty component. So really allowing a tribe to enter into whatever agreement they would like with an LEA. So I will say that. As you know, when we first started this process, in the rule, it requires two things. One, a work group, which Cindy and I facilitated that process in terms of, we didn't facilitate the conversations, but we brought in contractors, a couple folks, and I just want to clarify that although we did invite tribes to participate in that process, I think we had 2 tribes.
More than that.
3?
All circuits are busy. Please try your call again later. Announcement 8, switch 3.
We did have 3 tribes, at least 3 tribes kind of participate in that process. But in addition to that, we also sent out letters asking for kind of the true government to government process, so that consultation. And I was able to meet with 4 of those tribes. And all of that was prior to, was that information we tried to include in the May rulemaking that we brought forward. So I just think that's important for you guys to note. So really, as my conversations continue with tribes, there's not been a change in position or a change in what their expectations would be around Senate Bill 1509. And I think that was all I wanted to share with you.
Another update, though, is that of those 15 original school districts, one, the Dalles, has adopted a different mascot. And then we have received information, I believe that 2 other districts have started a process of adopting a different mascot. Although the other piece of information we received that is in at least one district who was sort of moving down that path, sort of when the rule stalled, their board kind of stalled in moving down the path as well, because the uncertainty sort of out there has caused some of the districts to sort of think there's going to be a bigger exception or something and kind of stop their processes.
Can I add just one more thing? I'm sorry, I spoke a lot about tribes, but on the other side, I have been in contact with probably every superintendent or principal in one of these districts, just feeling very anxious to have a decision made one way or the other, concerned about budget. And quite frankly, they've either been approached by a tribe or they've approached a tribe, and those conversations have begun, and really just looking for, to us, for some direction on, what those agreements should contain or shouldn't contain. Sorry, Cindy.
Well, is anybody that you've consulted with, or not asked this, is there a way to aggregate information from people that are not represented by tribes? As we heard from people today that.
Gosh, that's a good question.
I know that's such a loose group,
Right.
but I'm not sure, is that voice being heard? How are we, looks like.
We, on the work group that we convened relating to 1509, we did have representatives who are Native American, who are not members of one of the Oregon federally recognized tribes. We have also had, and you have had today, public comment from individuals who are of that category. We've also had comment from, when the original 2012 vote, I had counted the number of comments back then. It was over 800 individual comments. Yeah, so, I haven't counted the number of comments this time, but so we've had, a wide and diverse range of comments like no other topic in front of the state board that I'm aware of.
Just to piggyback on that, is it accurate that the majority of Oregonian Native Americans are not tribal members of one of the local, one of the 9 federally recognized tribes? You might not, it's okay if you don't know.
Okay, well, I was going to say that's what I've been told, but I would have to crunch numbers or get some more information before I said with it, without uncertainty.
I have a question for you. Now, you might have to think back to 2012, which I wasn't on the board at the time. But so you're saying there are, of the 9 tribes, there are several that are neutral?
There are.
And are there also those who are against mascots or not for mascots?
I have not heard that.
Even based on 2012 comment from tribes?
Yeah. Everyone that I've spoke to has either been neutral or for Senate Bill 1509.
Okay, did you speak to my tribe?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I don't know.
Right. In 2012, my recollection is we heard formally from 4 tribes, and when I say formally, from the tribal leadership specifically, or a letter that identified as representing the tribal council specifically as opposed to an individual.
Right.
We heard formally from 4 tribes. Siletz and Grand Ronde today you heard from again, and they were 2 of the 4. And then the other 2, my recollection is one of them expressed kind of a neutral stand, and the 4th expressed some support for the ban, although I've not seen that expressed most recently. So.
That was 4 expressed support for the ban?
No, I said...
there were 4 total.
4 total.
4 total.
2 against the ban, 1 neutral, and 1 kind of leaning towards supporting the ban.
Okay.
Chair Summers, I think the information about the number of Native American people in our state as compared to those that are Native American in the 9 tribal units is important data for us. And I ask if when it is time for us to vote that we would have that information.
I'll let you know that the data we collect is all self-identification. So
it's what we can.
Yeah.
So whatever, I just caution us on how we use that information.
Just in terms of data, the State Population Data Center at Portland State University
I access that
collects
often.
and also analyzes both the federal data from the census as well as state data blocks, and so they may be helpful in comparing what we have with what is the census data for your purposes there.
Perfect. Okay. Can I make a comment on that? And I don't know how to say this because I definitely feel like I'm a neutral party here, but I'm sorry, I'm just trying to use my words correctly, but regardless of the population, we are in Oregon, and these are our Oregon tribal ceded lands, and so I don't want us to get too caught up in numbers, and not to say that we shouldn't be hearing from everybody, because I think we do, and my heart goes out to all of the folks that were here today, but I just needed to say that.
Sure.
Thank you.
If I may add to that, Madam Chair, I think what April is trying to say is that we have to look at this matter from a technical point of view in relationship to the 9 federally recognized tribes in the state of Oregon and the context of the state law and how it applies to that.
Thank you
so I think it's important to consider all Native American students in the state of Oregon and to be mindful of their needs to be successful and the supports that we afford them. But for the purpose of this rule, we have to put it in the context of a government-to-government relationship that defines the state's board's role in relationship to the law that you're requested to act on.
Thank you for articulating that.
I know it's much broader than that, but it has a technical component that we have to consider.
So the other thing I wanted to mention is that is in your board packet is a new proposed state board resolution. In conversations with individual board members and certainly in the discussion back in May, some individual members expressed a desire to, if you will, make a strong statement of endorsement for the 2012 ban. Also, the resolution allows the board a bit more flexibility than just a rule would. So we took the resolution that the 2012 board had originally adopted and updated it, and that is in your packet today as well. And it does state many of the rationales that were used by the board in 2012, and I think you've heard many of those today for the ban, but also specifies some of the statements that we've heard from this board, and this, when I say this board, you guys, in 2015, expressed in relation to this issue. And so that's also in the packet. We also, with this revision of the rule and also the draft, today this is, we're calling this a first reading. It is not up for adoption, and part of that was to allow additional commentary on, the new rule draft. So it would not be up for an adoption until January, and we would split the adoption of the resolution and the rule, so there would be 2 votes. But we are looking for comment or suggestions from board members specifically on the resolution, and on the rule.
Cindy, today we heard some public comment about the rule allowing for the possibility of adopting the nicknames Redskins and Savages as mascots. Do you agree that the rule as written would allow for those names specifically to be used?
No, I do not.
Can you speak to that?
And yeah, thank you for that question. The reason I say that is because the original ban, which is still captured in the rule in front of you, specifically said that those names could not be used. So then we turn to the exception, and the exception says that, the proper name of the tribe had to been part of, the school district's mascot on January 1, 2013. We had no Oregon school districts that were using either of those names on January 1st, 2013. And the 3 school districts that I cited to earlier, they are, I should have these memorized, the Siletz Warriors, the Molalla Indians,
And the Rogue River Chieftains.
and the Rogue River Chieftains.
Okay. Other questions or comments at this time?
Just wanted to remind everybody that Alaska Native American Indian State Education Plan was adopted a few months ago by this board. And so we will be educating people in our school districts about the 9 tribes of Oregon and other tribes. So I just want you to know that that's going to be implemented, and it's already started, so.
Thank you.
I got a couple.
Oh. Charles, I didn't even know you were there.
I couldn't interrupt with all the testimony going on. So that's good. We've affected each other.
Turn that up, please.
Okay, go ahead.
It's too loud, you can go down.
So I just really want to appreciate all the commentary and feedback. This is such a difficult and heart-wrenching, challenging issue that the board continues to deal with, and that ODs continue to deal with, and all the right issues seem to be in front of us. So as from a process perspective, I just really want to appreciate the effort of this board and ODE staff and the community to sort of put all of the difficult issues on the table for us. So I really respect that. It's very challenging. I know that the board, many board members share the sentiment of sort of issue fatigue with this one because we've been through it so many times. I did want to raise a couple of issues that I've raised both of these before, but I'm not sure they ever got traction, or maybe they did, I just don't remember, so Cindy will help me. But there are two things that are really sticking with me around the rules that I want to put back out on the table. One is under the section, let's see, under part, what is this, E, and it's about in order to have a valid agreement. Everyone seeing that? And then it lists A, B, and C underneath that. Everyone listening?
We're listening.
Carry on.
Okay. It's so hard to be on the phone. I can't think what's left. Okay, so in that section, and I know I brought this up before, but it says that the agreement must be approved by the board of the public school and contain the signature of the board chairperson. Respecting again the issue that was raised again here today, and including by board members, about the representation of many individuals, Native American individuals, who may not have tribal affiliation in Oregon, but are deep cultural stakeholders in these decisions. I've said before, and I just want to say again, that I would feel better if we reified the necessity to have public hearings at the local board level prior to the board entering into an agreement. So many boards will do this automatically, but without it being stipulated, I worry that it won't be necessary. And this seems to be the kind of issue at a local level that should involve the kind of engagement that we've certainly had around this issue for years. So, Cindy, you remember I raised this issue before, and I don't remember if you convinced me away from this or what, but I wanted to put that one back out there. And then the second one I've also raised before, under H, it says a tribe and a public school may jointly revoke an agreement by petitioning the State Board of Education. My feeling is that if a tribe independently believes that the agreement should end, that it wouldn't have to be a joint agreement with them and the school district in that situation, that they could directly petition the board without doing it jointly.
Charles, just clarification, are you saying then that their petition could result in termination of that agreement from the part of the Native American entity?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why have
I realize that not everyone may agree with either of those 2 points, but my instinct is that in this situation, if the school district thinks it should persist and the tribe doesn't, it doesn't allow the tribe to have say in that situation. And I do think that part of the complexity of the spirit of us even coming back to this for me is about ensuring that the decisions that are ultimately made, as difficult as this is for any of us to deal with, are really done in a way that empowers the tribes.
Charles, this might not be a question for you, but maybe for Cindy. Why have them come to the board with that issue at all? Why can't they just terminate it themselves without petitioning?
Yeah, part of the rationale for that originally was because for the agreement to be valid, they had to come to the board for approval. So that's why they were coming back to the board to revoke.
I see. Got it.
Yeah.
I remember that. Thank you. Anything else, Charles, before we mute you?
No, I think those are my big issues, beyond the big issues that we continue to talk about with us. I know we all have very strong feelings about.
Charles, don't let Miranda mute you. Sorry, that was a joke.
Any other comments or questions from the board?
Cindy, did you want to respond to the first issue too?
No.
I just don't want to keep on raising it.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, Charles. I think when we talked about it before, no, we can put in that there's a public hearing at the school district level relating to this. The school district board would need to vote to adopt an agreement in public because it's a board agreement, and they only function as a board in public. But we can put in that there's a specific public hearing with opportunity for, the public to comment on the agreement.
Okay.
Yeah. And then also on that topic, somewhat related, is that if there were to be agreements that if these rules did get adopted and there were agreements entered into and they were to come before all of you, of course, that would also be in a public meeting.
Excuse me, but Don had asked a clarifying question, and I think we need it out in the public space. Don, you want to?
And we're talking about the boards just within the reaches of the sovereign tribes. Is that what you were talking about, Charles?
We muted him.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, the rules, I think we had talked about this before, is that out of respect for the sovereignty of the tribes, the rules are phrased in terms of directions to the school districts. So when Charles raised the issue of a public comment period or what have you, public, that is a direction to the school district specifically. What processes a tribe would use to approve an agreement would be up to them.
But what it does, and I know that there's already, obviously, their vote would be public. So I know that, some of us have been on local boards, so I know there's a public process. But this requires a deeper public engagement, and that's what I'm trying to protect. Partly because in this situation right now, there really is no place for the boards to be required to get it. Plus, if you're not part of a tribe, one of the 9 federally recognized tribes in Oregon, there's no automatic venue to empower that voice. And so I'm trying to create it.
Are we tacitly recognizing the fact that not that there are non-tribes, that's not our purvey, but that there are other members of this cultural community from other places, including, as Angela reminded us, including people in Oregon whose tribe was never re-recognized or recognized by the federal government, that still consider themselves members of communities. And this is not to impugn the sovereignty of anybody, but in terms of that, there's a space there.
Right, well, this is a tremendously difficult topic. It's a huge lift for everybody, and I just want to thank the board members, ODE, and the members of the public for engaging so thoroughly in this process. We have so much to think about still. This is a first reading, and we should be coming back in January, I believe. Is that, yes?
For action.
For action. So thank you so much, you guys. April, thank you. I know you've been working very hard.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Cindy. Thanks.
Madam Chair, can we have a 5-minute break now?
Oh, you're so neat.
I know, I'm a wimp, but.
Yeah, I think so. Is that all right? Okay, we're gonna take 5. Regardless of that. So we're back to English language learners.
I'll give it back
If you
to
can
you.
just summarize the
I can.
changes, then I think we actually are probably.
Yeah, we're good.
So Chair Summer, members of the board, these were the English language learner district and school improvement rules that you heard before the noon hour. Distributed to you as if by magic is a revised version of these rules, and you'll notice they're revised because there are changes marked on them. And at the top it says revised by CH on 12/10, which would be today. And so the two sort of areas that they were revised in is that consistently throughout the rules, it now identifies the districts as identified districts, not selected districts, to reflect Board Member Martinez's suggestion. So you'll see that, like I said, throughout the rules. And then the second area is incorporating that these practices and so forth and interventions are going to be evidence-based, And so I put that in two places in the rule. One was under the programmatic rule 603, which kind of lays out the framework for the entire program. And I specifically have said that the department will identify and disseminate evidence-based practices to assist identified ELL transformation target districts and other districts, frankly, to better meet objectives and needs of ELL students. And then I also placed that language over in 612, specifically where Charles, I think, had suggested, to say that these specific interventions that are going to happen with the transformation districts are to be evidence-based. So with that, I am still asking for an adoption of these rules today.
I so move.
Second.
Okay. What are we moving? I'm just.
Move on adoption of the rules as presented by Cindy Hunt.
Okay, so
the revised version.
Yeah.
with the December 10th amendments.
That's what I seconded.
Okay, and you've seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. That was our quickest work ever. Thank you, good luck. So we're moving on to another English language learner topic, English language learner revenue and expenditure report criteria. Hi there.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board, Deputy Superintendent Noor, when he gets back. My name is Michael Wilfong, and I'm the Director of School Finance and School Facilities. I'm here to discuss the proposed rule for the English language learner revenue and expenditure report criteria as required under House Bill 3499, and also give an update on the ELL Finance Advisory Work Group. First, I'd like to acknowledge the great work and support of the ELL Finance Advisory Group. I feel privileged to work with these individuals and facilitate the discussions around this very important topic. This work group is made up of dedicated and talented ELL directors, school business managers, superintendents, and ELL advocates. We first met in September, and a full day of discussion resulted in the proposed rule for the ELL expenditure revenue report submitted to the board in October. At the first meeting, we also discussed how to improve accounting for ELL expenditures in school districts with the program budgeting and accounting manual, also known as the PBAM. It was decided in the first work group session to recommend to the PBAM committee, which is also an advisory group to the department and made up of school business officials and business managers. These folks are the day-to-day practitioners of the school accounting system, the school business managers. We would recommend adding a third option in an attempt to identify costs associated with ELL student support that may not directly relate to an ELL program. For example, a dual language immersion program would not fit the criteria of an ELL program, but the results of these strategies for ELL students are promising. It was my intent to have this and the other two ELL accounting codes currently in the PBAM reviewed by the PBAM committee when they meet in January 2016. This process, reviewed by the PBAM, typically spans several months, with suggested revisions being vetted by stakeholders statewide. I'd like to note we do have crossover representation for both advisory groups, as the business managers on the ELL Finance Work Group also participate in the PBAM committee. It was suggested in the September meeting that the new function code point to the department's ELL program guide, as this manual has an extensive list of services and best practices. The work group suggested the new function code would read something to the effect, English language learner supporting services not attributed to ELL programs. For example, costs would include indirect services identified in the ELL program guide created by ODE if they are in support of ELL students. During the first meeting, it was also recommended a list of what should and shouldn't be coded as ELL expenditures be developed and put into the PBAM. I believe this concern comes from, for example, the use of translation and interpretation services, and that in some cases, all these expenditures are being rolled under the ELL expenses, even though they may not be for EL student support. They should only be included under EL expenses if they support EL students and programs, which I believe can be understood based on the current definitions in the PBAM. However, I am certainly willing to clarify that in the PBAM if necessary. Since the September meeting, ODE staff have presented at conferences on these topics and met with business officials to let them know these changes are coming. In all instances, we have received a lot of support. I believe everyone agrees we need to improve upon the definitions of PBAM currently used for the ELL expenditures. During this time of outreach, I had proposed to bring the work group together in October, November, or at the very least have a discussion via email to address any concerns, and I received no interest. Because there wasn't a lot of activity requests to meet or any requests for discussions via email, I assume the members of the work group were satisfied with the work and the outcomes to date. In preparation for today's state board meeting, I brought the advisory work group together yesterday to discuss what I felt may be 3 areas of concern to make sure we are all in agreement with our resolutions. We reviewed the proposed criteria for the revenue and expenditure report. We reviewed the codes and definitions for ELL accounting and the PBAM. We reviewed the proposed reporting responsibilities under Section 6 of House Bill 3499. And during our meeting yesterday, it was decided to do the following. We recommend to the BBAN committee to review both the special education and the English language learner accounting codes and improve the definitions and possibly add or subtract some codes. We recommend to include EL instructors and program staff in the meeting of the PBAM committee in January, moving forward if needed. And I thought that was a key piece, is to include some of the instructors and the program staff. Even the business managers that were there thought that was a really good idea. We recommend to have a 4th accounting code for ELL expenses to address the concerns around translation and interpretive services. We approved the criteria used for the ELL expenditure report that's currently proposed today in rule. We continue to support having the responsibility of the reporting requirement identified under Section 6 of House Bill 3499 to be that of the Department of Education and not the school districts. The primary rationale here is that the department already has this data from reports already submitted by the school districts. After our meeting, I came away feeling everyone was in agreement with our resolutions and agreed there is still work to be done and will continue to be done, which is and has been the case with the accounting manual. The criteria for the expense and revenue report can be established in a rule, and we may need to come back to the board to address future concerns. In refinement of the EL accounting codes and the PBAM, which is also reviewed by the state board, we will be coming back for review in the spring of 2016. In my belief, with all of the input from both the ELL work groups and the PBAM work group, that we will see a big improvement in how we account for EL expenditures moving forward. I believe we have taken some big steps forward in our group's work, but I also realize there's still many steps to be taken as we go down the path to improve outcomes for EL students. With that, in an attempt to be brief, that concludes my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions or concerns. Thank you.
Not a question, but just really want to appreciate all the work that you and the group has done. We know it's an ongoing piece there, and we're going to have to keep tinkering with it, or you're going to have to keep tinkering with it, but there is an appreciation for all the work that went on.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to appreciate just getting other your involvement, being persistent, and getting people to the table, and because this is really important. You know, at the end of the day, we all want to make sure that those funds follow the student, you know, that they're allocated to. So I appreciate you getting some of those practitioners, if you can get them into there, so to make sure that it's we're all kind of on the same page and everybody has an understanding of how you code this out. It's pretty technical. I don't know. I can just imagine like the sheet with a bunch of numbers and
it's
crazy.
about like
it's about
nice spreadsheets.
Yeah, a nice spreadsheet. So hopefully you
a lot
get
of data,
people like that.
A lot
Yeah.
of financial.
So thank you for being persistent, and bringing people together.
Okay.
And engaging stakeholders sounds like it was a cat herding happening there that you were trying to do there.
At first, we were trying to get the right mix, but I think that in the end, we had a lot of the key people there. And again, like I said, very talented, very dedicated, and I really felt privileged to be part of that group. So.
Do you have something? I thought I heard you.
I was just thinking, you know, I guess a question, and so just to summarize, can you just summarize that for me? Is that you want to move money from the ELL to, you don't want to move it, you want to move the the finance line items?
No, mainly what we're trying to do is trying to better account for how the ELL revenues from the state school fund are being spent.
Okay.
I'll be the first one to admit right now that the definitions or the codes around that are relatively vague.
Okay.
And the concern there is that statewide we, for the most part, I know that we don't have consistency on how districts are interpreting those rules. And so it's my intent to clarify that and add examples to the PBAM.
So the goal is better accountability.
Better accountability.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate
Right.
that.
Yeah, we're not
Okay.
moving money per se. We're just trying to account for it better.
Okay.
A
Thank
higher
you.
level of transparency.
Right. Great.
Okay. Yes.
Did I move before? I can't even remember.
No.
So
I
moved.
would entertain a motion.
So move.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Abstentions? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Are you sticking with us for capital improvement, or are you?
Yes. I'm just going to move over one chair.
Just to mix it up a little bit?
Right.
Welcome. If you could all state your names for the record.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Rick Krager. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Administration, and this is my first time in front of you since I've been here. Hired back in July, so I'm about 5 months on the job, and really excited to have the chance to work with you and be able to present this program here today. I think, as was alluded to earlier in some of the testimony, this is a brand new program coming to you that is quite different than anything really the Department of Education has done before. It is around the capital matching improvement program, and Mr. Elliott here is going to do most of the presenting and provide you a summary of what we have been able to do to date. We are asking for approval of temporary rules to get this program rolled out. I know when I came to the agency, one of the big surprises to me was, hey, guess what? You're going to get a brand new program, and it's be about $126 million worth of bonding authority, of which the agency's never issued bonds directly before. So as a finance geek, I was a bit excited about that from the standpoint of really being able to be cutting edge and get out there and really address a need that is huge. I mean, you'll hear numbers somewhere in the neighborhood of $7.6 billion of deferred maintenance need in our school district buildings across the state. This is a tremendous opportunity to get started in addressing those issues and really look at it, and when I look at these resources, as a leverage, as the ability to get out and contribute some of the state resources that hopefully will leverage more local dollars through the issuance of local school bonds and get some of our facilities up to where they need to be. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Elliott and let him wind him up, let him go. And I do want to say both Mr.
Wound up before.
Yeah, I know he's a wound up guy. I am so blessed and fortunate to have both of these gentlemen to my left and right. They have done tremendous work on this. And like I said, this is new. This is a new program. This is something different than we've done in the past, and the two of them have just really jumped up and done a great job, and I give them all the credit in the world. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Elliott.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Michael Elliott. I am the State School Fund Coordinator and have been working on this new program. So we're specifically asking for temporary rules around one part of the program. There's 3 parts, and I believe I have a PowerPoint presentation that is, okay. So, okay. I was. Sorry.
Keep going if you want.
Okay. So to briefly cover, there are 3 aspects of the program. The first is the big one. It's called the AWESOME program. It's the Oregon School Capital Improvement Matching Program. And that is the $126 million project or program. And that $126 million is authorized bonding capacity authorized by the legislature, and that will be used to match districts that pass their local general obligation bonds, and the matching formula and priority list we'll talk about because those are the subject of the rules today. The next 2 programs are the special assessment grants and then the hardship grants. So special assessment grants, the legislature authorized a reduction of the state school fund facility grant that in this case is $2.25 million for this biennium, and about $1.8 million from that facility grant will go to fund these special assessment grants. And these grants are for facilities assessments, just laying out what is the current status of the facility? How old is the building? How old is the actual age of the building? How old is the relative age in terms of have there been major systems upgrades or roof upgrades, or as I just went to a conference, so like, building envelope, have the windows been upgraded, that sort of thing. Then we'll be looking at that sort of thing. I will be providing funding to districts so that they can undertake these, because in 2017-19 biennium, they will be required to submit these as part of their application for the AWESOME program, the matching fund program. The next will be long-range facility plans. Those will also be required to be submitted. And then seismic assessments. As you know, seismic is a significant issue in Oregon. Many of our school districts and schools need some seismic rehabilitation. There is a seismic grant I'll touch briefly on because it's run through a different department, but there will be money for the assessment part of that so districts can get an idea of which of their schools need the most rehabilitation and start integrating that into their long-range facility plans. And then finally, this money can be used for other specialized assessments. Now, this part of the program we're not expecting to get up and running until the summer of 2016. So we'll be most likely before you again in the spring of 2016 asking for rules as we work through the definitions of that program. And then the final portion of this program, this whole Senate Bill 447, is the hardship grant. These are grants up to $500,000 per district for the boiler went out, the roof fell in, some significant hardship the district didn't anticipate and doesn't have the money for.
Just on that, now with seismic, that's pure seismic, that's not like tsunami and other natural
disasters
catastrophes that affect schools, that potentially affect schools.
Yes, no, that is correct. That, yes, this is seismic only. It's not tsunami. It's not flooding, even though we all need our boats today. It is just for seismic because it's trying to tie in with, it's not a tie-in, but it can help with the seismic grant program put on by the thank you, Business Oregon, and that is seismic rehabilitation of schools and first response units. And this will be an assessment. It won't actually get them any money to do the rehabilitation, but it will help the district assess what they need to do so they can start costing that out. And hopefully go to their voters and say, for a local GO bond, let's work on making sure our kids are safe in a major earthquake. The hardship grants, the reason why this is last on the priority list because it's done through unspent facility grant funds. We will not know what facility grant funds are unspent until the end of the biennium. So that is least on the priority list because we won't know how much we will have. And so the rules for that will probably be a year or so out, but we'll be back before the board to discuss those as well. So those are the three programs. We're focusing on the top one. And as you can see, this money, it's about $123 million after we take out cost of issuance, and 60% is going to go to a priority list, and 40% is going to go to first in time. And those are the rules we're asking you to adopt on a temporary basis today. So, covered this. The priority list is based on three variables. ADMW, which is average daily membership weighted. It's how we count students for funding purposes. Poverty, as defined by the United States Census Bureau. And then the assessed value, which is what we get from Department of Revenue. 40% goes to first in time, and the statute is very clear. It's any district can apply, and it's the first district in the door gets the money. Now, we've modified that to a lottery process, and I'll explain why later when we get into that. As I mentioned, seismic program, you may receive a lot of questions about this. The rules are the seismic grant given out by Business Oregon cannot be used as a basis for this program for matching funds. However, this program and local GO bonds can be used as a basis to get a seismic grant award in terms of matching. That seismic program basically says you have to do an entire building. You can't just fix the roof, you can't just fix the walls, you have to fix everything. They're going to give you up to $1.5 million for that program. So if the building's going to cost you $3 million, the local district's going to have to come in and make up that difference. They can use these funds to make up that difference. Okay. We are doing this in 3 grant periods. About half of the money will be committed in the first grant period, which is the May 2016 election, and then 25% in November 16 and 25% in May 2017. The actual commitments will happen before that to allow districts time to market to their constituents in their communities to say that, yes, we have a commitment from the state, so it's important to go ahead and pass the bond. The priority list. This is based on work originally done by the School Facilities Task Force. This task force was created by the 2013 legislature. And the goal of the priority list is to ensure that those districts with high poverty and low assessed value receive higher priority. That means that they're going to jump in the front of the line to encourage those communities to invest in their school districts. As as Rick said, it's about $7.6 billion in deferred maintenance. Now, that's a big estimate. We're not, we don't have exact numbers, but even if we're off by $500 million, that's still a lot of money out there. So those districts that may have had a harder time historically getting GO bonds passed, general obligation bonds passed, they get to jump to the front of the line to ensure that they have a better chance of passing those bonds. The reason why we're asking for temporary rules is because the application period, the applications will start to be received January 15th at 8 a.m. And so it would be a little difficult to come before the board and do the full rules process. Now, you might be asking, well, why did we wait so long? Well, we were really trying to make sure we had a lot of stakeholder outreach. We met with an advisory group. We worked at statewide conferences. We've set up a website. We've done a lot of work to get this out and get input. The advisory group is required by the bill, and it's required to include financial advisors, architects and engineers, and school business officials. We reached out to school business officials from all parts of the state. Baker School District, for example, LeGrand School District, so the northeastern part. We were able to get Klamath Falls school business official to come in. We also had Mr. Grotting, he was part of the advisory group. We also had several superintendents as well as a couple of school board members. So we really tried to work with this group, bring it together, present the program to them, and really listen to their advice. For example, the advisory group was concerned about a strict first-in-time method, either lining up outside the door at 8 a.m. or submitting electronically. There were concerns that districts would be driving very long ways in potentially very bad weather, or that districts that are more rural may not have the internet capacity as districts that are more urban. And so we modified that first in time based on advice from the advisory group. Again, statewide conferences in November, there was a statewide Oregon School Boards Association conference, as well as an Oregon Association of School Business Officials conference. And one of our advisory group members presented at the OSBA conference, and then the ODE presented at the OASBO conference, and we've listened to that as well. So it took a while to get that feedback, get that up and running, but we felt that was very important to make sure we had a good program to present to you. So that's why we're kind of down the wire asking for the temporary rules.
Do you offer any assistance to like the rural areas? So I'm thinking down in Coos County, they could really use this. And I don't know how the focuses for them is. I don't know what they're working on, but do you offer any kind of assistance for people who are filling out this application? If they ask for help, is there somebody who can help them? Because I think some of the rural schools might need a little assistance once in a while.
Yes, Madam Chair, Member Bowen, absolutely. Any district can call. Actually, it is myself that will be providing the assistance, and we will provide them with all the assistance. They can send in an application early for review. I can't officially accept it because of the first-in-time aspect, but I will be happy to review applications, answer any questions all the way through the process. It's just January 15th at 8 a.m., I can no longer do that because that's when the applications are due, and we have to respect the first-in-time process.
Angela will be obtaining your cell phone number to disseminate.
I think sometimes people don't because they just aren't sure.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, and they don't have the capacity. A lot of districts just don't have the capacity to even put together a good proposal because they're lean.
Right. The really good news is this is about a 2-page application.
Good.
We are asking for some basic information in terms of who would be the contact for the district, who has the authority to enter into any future contract should they get the award, how much they're going to go out for in a bond so we can do the funding formula correctly, what projects they're looking for, and then some additional documents, preferably board minutes, saying that the district is very serious about this. We want to discourage those districts that are just what we'd call fishing from applying, because they may get a commitment and then they may take it from a district that was very serious, and that would cause hardship for that district. So it is a very simple application.
you had mentioned lottery. Can you go more on that, please?
Yeah, so I will jump ahead to that. So the first in time, again, we had concerns about driving up and showing up in person and lining up at, I think, 6 a.m. is when the park opens. There was a big concern there. There was concern with the strict internet submission. So what we're doing is we're creating a lottery process. And how that works is, there will be a set time period, and all applications received within that time period will be assumed to have been received at the same time. So for example, applications received between 8 and 12:30 will all be at the same level of first in time. And so if there's not enough money to provide a commitment to every single application in that time period, then there will be a random lottery to determine which applications will receive the funding and which will not. And then the next time period would be 12:30 to 5 that same day. And then the last time period would be from 5 p.m. that day to Tuesday, December 19th, just because we expect almost all of the applications to come in during that first part of the day. Okay? So the priority list formula, and this is hopefully a pictorial description of what the rules are trying to describe. And it starts off with, we have to determine several variables. The first of these is the poverty variable. So we take the small area income poverty estimate provided by the U.S. Census Bureau, and we multiply it by a 20 poverty weight. This is to ensure that poverty is a meaningful variable in this formula. Originally, the task force estimated 2, and after reviewing it with our advisory group, the advisory group was concerned that poverty had no real impact on the formula, that assessed value was the driver. So we increased it to a 20 after doing some analysis to determine what would be best, and 20 came out to be it. We divide that by the district average daily membership resident, that's just the number of students in the district, and that gets us the weighted percentage of students in poverty. The next variable is the assessed value per ADMW, and that's simply taking the Department of Revenue's assessed value, and we divide it by the district extended ADMW, and we get assessed value over ADMW. Another concern that the advisory group had was that those districts that have very large online charter schools would get their ranking increased because of their increase in ADMW. And doing some review, we felt that those districts with large online charter schools, that ADM should be excluded, but other districts with brick and mortar charter schools or smaller online charter schools, those would not be excluded. So it's just those, the two significant ones are Orca and Orva on the South Coast. So we take those two variables, and you take your assessed value per ADMW, you divide that by your 1 plus that weighted poverty percentage, and that gets you your basis for your ranking, which is called the adjusted assessed value per ADMW. And now is here where I lose everybody because I'm going to hand out the rankings. So everybody, want to take a look.
Hey, Michael.
So that is actually an alphabetical, I think, I gave one too many copies. That, I believe, is an alphabetical list of the rankings. Mm-hmm. It's not in rank order, but I thought that would be easier for scanning for various districts if you wanted to see. So the funding formula is just simply taking the priority list formula and moving 2 steps forward. The first is you take your adjusted AV per ADMW, that basis for the ranking, divide it by 1,000. That's to get a rate of how much money that the district could possibly get on a rated basis. And that equals your local revenue per 1,000 per ADMW. That's to get it closer to kind of what the tax rates are, because tax rates are usually expressed as per 1,000 of assessed value. You take the guaranteed tax rate amount, which is 1,000. This is an artificially high amount. It was designed to encompass virtually all of the districts and how much money they would get. You subtract out what the district could theoretically get using its assessed value and its poverty, and you multiply that by the district's ADMW, and that equals the calculated grant amount. And if you look, most of the districts, in fact, 160 districts are below the minimums set forth in statute. The statute actually says that the minimum grant amount that any district can receive is $4 million using this formula. The maximum grant amount to prevent the larger districts from simply taking all of the funding is $8 million. Now, for those districts that pass a general obligation bond less than $4 million, they will get a 1-to-1 match. So if they pass a $2 million bond, they will get a $2 million match from the state, assuming they're, they get the commitment. So they're never going to get more than 1-to-1. They'll get $4 million or $8 million beyond that. And as you can see, some brief statistics, only 36 districts are eligible for more than the minimum $4 million. And I know that I believe OSBA was very concerned about the task force, because the task force recommended $2 million as the minimum, and they wanted to increase it to $4 million to make sure that, a school is a school. It's going to cost about the same whether you're a district that has 20 students or a district that has 200 students. And so they wanted to make sure that every district had the opportunity to actually make meaningful improvements and not just get, a few pennies on the dollar. And then 14 districts would be eligible for more than $8 million without the cap. So again, the application procedure, as earlier stated, applications accepted starting 8 a.m. Friday, January 15th. They can submit either in person or electronically. One application. We are not having them submit an application for the priority list and an application for the first in time. What will occur is after we get all the applications, we'll take the 60% of money that will go through the priority list and we'll fund that first. So if you submitted in the second period, but you're number one via priority list, you're going to get your priority list money and then you'll just be taken out of the first in time pools. So that what will be left will be those districts that did not get funding through the priority list, but will be in the running for the first in time funding. And then the remaining districts come in first in time rules. Again, the lottery procedure, which I talked about earlier, so I'll just skip through this briefly. 3 time periods, all districts that submit within that time period will be assumed to receive at the same time. There is additional information at our website there. Next steps will probably be before you in the spring, talking about the technical assistance grants once we've had a chance to meet with advisory committees and experts in the field, and then probably again next year as we start to look towards the hardship grants, and possibly some refinement of this application process as we go through a couple application periods. With that, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Madam Chair, if I may, just to add, I know that there was a question, I think Member Bowen had asked about the technical assistance element. And as Michael did a great job and alluded to, that this bill is bigger than just this particular program. This is obviously the largest, but there is a whole aspect around this with technical assistance and guidance. This bill was not actually scheduled to become implemented until January 1st. We have been doing a lot of work within our own existing staff up to this point to get the program off the ground because we wanted to hit the election that is coming up in May. And obviously you have to be ahead of schedule to be able to give the school districts time to get their measures in place. So we are really ahead of schedule from that standpoint. And so as we develop this program more, we're going to, obviously we have 4 positions that we still need to hire, and we will have individuals on staff, particularly around assessments, around capital planning that will help provide guidance to school districts. In addition, I see a really strong partnership with OSBA that we will take advantage of in that many school districts, I think as was alluded to earlier, is they don't necessarily have the capacity or have never really been issued local bonds. And obviously that's a requirement in terms of getting the dollars from this particular program. That's where I think OSBA has a lot of resources, and I think Morgan was here earlier, but he's been a great partner and will be committed to helping those school districts that have never maybe issued bonds, and this could be a great opportunity to leverage those local resources. So again, there's still a whole bunch more work that is going to be put into this, a lot of good things coming, and I feel like we've really been able to jump out in front of Senate Bill 447 and get it going early.
Excellent. I hope a lot of districts are poised to take advantage of this as soon as possible because you guys did such great work early. So
You hear the pipeline is building.
I agree, and getting this, ramped up to, granted, this is a temporary, but this is what, 6 months? Is temporary, when you put a temporary rule out?
They have to come back next month for a first reading and adoption in March.
Okay, but this for the temporary, we can get them going with this.
Yes, we can get them going
Yeah,
right away.
so with the processes, because that's really important, especially if you're in a district where bond measures have not fared so well. And with this, you've got some leverage even when you go out to say that we're going to get some help with this. So I really want to applaud the work that you've done with this, and it's some complicated, but most of the people who do facilities understand that.
Chair Summers, a question. I'm working with a real small district on the coast and in strategic planning, and talking to them, they would very much like to be a part of the seismic grant, but they said, as you mentioned, that it has to be the whole entire building. And they have had very, very poor luck in geo bonds or capital improvement bonds, and feel as though they have some real needs, see the money there, but don't believe, given the political landscape and the economic landscape, even with the new help that you talked about that they can receive in trying to pass bonds, that they'll ever be able to take advantage of that. And I'd like to know, and I know there's really good reasons, and I'll take that back and let them know. I'd like to know why, in a small district situation, in the situation they're in, that the requirement would be the full building, which to some degree, at least in this district, just says you're not going to be able to utilize this.
Madam Chair, Member Coloma, sorry. I believe the answer, now I'm not, Business Oregon would be the best person to direct that to, but I believe there's twofold answer. One is very technical, and that is if you fix a roof but don't fix the walls, you really haven't made the building seismically safe. And so they're very interested in getting the building, the entire building, to withstand significant earthquake damage. So, and I believe it's a life preservation standards, meaning the kids will be able to get out. So if you just fix a roof to seismically upgrade, but you don't fix the walls, you've not made the building to those standards. And so that's the technical reason why they want to see the entire building done, so the entire building will help the kids survive in an earthquake. So yes, I understand that as a limitation, and that is frustrating for small districts, but the idea is that if you don't fix the whole building may not survive an earthquake, and you could suffer.
I think I'd ask the three of you, as you continue to work with this over the years, and, more than likely, I think the legislature would continue to move it forward in years past when this money runs out, that you just might rethink that possible situation. Maybe there is some way for buildings to work in stages or something of that nature. And the second question I'd like to ask is, who was the architectural member of the committee, member of the committee, and the two investment banking firms?
The architectural member of the committee was Christina Skellinger.
Which firm?
McKinstry.
Okay.
She asked to be involved, and then Carol Samuels and Matt Donahue. Carol Samuels from Piper Jaffray, and Matt Donahue, blanking on his firm, but both of them were finance directors, and they were also part of this first advisory group. For the technical assistance grants, we will be asking for more architects, more construction engineering firms to be on that, because we will need that expertise to make sure that the grants do go to all districts and do help districts that really have needs in terms of assessments and building their strategic plans.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Madam Chair, can I go? Okay. I didn't know if you were talking. Okay. So I think this is a great opportunity. I'm really excited that this is going to springboard. We just passed our bond. It took us 20 years in Woodburn School District, and so I think we missed that. We probably would have. But if those that know me, and even those that don't, I've been a lifelong advocate for equity and inclusion in not only the public sector, but the private sector. And so when I look at $126.2 million out there in our community, what that speaks to me is how can we ensure that underutilized contractors, meaning minority and women-owned firms, have access to the actual work? Because one of the things that I see out there in the world is that it's not, the equity isn't there. Mm-hmm. So it's outreach, access, opportunity. How do we, if I were to look at a proposal and I saw that somebody who wrote a grant had some really good aspirational goals to utilize underutilized firms, which are minority and women-owned firms, that would make a really strong case for me, because I think that that's something that again, I advocate that in public sector and private sector, that Native American, Latino, African American, women-owned companies, firms, contractors, or workforce need to be part, benefiting, from some of this, right? And I think that's what I would just express to you, that I would like to see something like that. We're starting at 126 million, but you start adding that to, it gets to like billions, like you said. And I think that we need to ensure that communities of color and women-owned firms are financially healthy, as well as the other firms in the state of Oregon. And so I just wanted to advocate for that, and hopefully that I don't know if that's right here, right now, if that's your charge, but whoever that is, when we get to that point, that would be something that would be strongly encouraged when these applications come in, because I think that's really, really important, because there's a lot of great companies out there that I don't think are having access to these opportunities.
Madam Chair, members of the board, one of the nice things about this program is that before they get the funding, they go through several stages, and one of the final things they have to sign is a grant agreement. And that sets out their roles and responsibilities and how they will use the funds. And we can definitely look at putting in some usage of minority and women-owned businesses in terms of how then that puts the onus on the districts to use public funds to go out and ensure that underutilized companies are being marketed to and encouraged to apply.
And I guess I would just add to that, I think, as you well know, and I think you said it well, is that this is one portion of the total project. I mean, at a minimum, you take 126 and multiply by 2 if this is a one-to-one match. So you're looking at, $252 million minimum that will go into construction contracts across the state. And that's a minimum, and I know it's going to be a lot more than that, because much of the match is much smaller than one-to-one, particularly when you're talking about the large projects. So I think that there is an opportunity, as we've talked about with this particular program, that you're leveraging jobs, you're leveraging opportunities out there in the community. And I think, to your point, this is where the school districts are going to really come in too, is that these will be their contracts. Obviously, they'll be the ones running the whole contract management piece. But I think that there are opportunities in which we can influence and be able to, I don't want to say prioritize, but at least be able to put emphasis on these are the type of outcomes or the type of activities that we want to see. I think as the program matures more, we'll learn more and have the opportunities to craft it in ways that make sense.
I know they through ODOT, and they have systems in place, programs for underutilized companies. So, there's probably out there, and I don't want to jump the gun, but wherever that may be, I think that would be really a strong statement for us to show that, we're thinking about, not only the public side, but the private side. And again, I think that helps everybody.
Absolutely.
Well, I just want to say, right on, Anthony. Everything you said, I'm right with you on that. I think that we do need to utilize the companies that are out there that are minority and women-owned businesses, and it's good for the community, and that means it's good for families, which means it's good for schools.
Goes
Just
back
saying.
around.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Am I not doing my duty?
Yeah.
So moved.
This is
For
up-
temporary rule?
Yeah, temporary rule. Okay, a second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Abstentions? Motion passes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good work.
Okay, we have an additional temporary rule before us, the Tribal Attendance Pilot Program Grant.
Tabitha, it's great to see you again.
Good to see you. How are you doing, Mr. Henry?
I am doing well.
I'm here now.
Yeah,
You're
I
here
heard
now,
you
too.
fled PSU for more southern climate.
Oh, yeah, I love the rain. It's been grand. Madam Chair, board members, I'm Tabitha Whitefoot, and I am the newest Indian Education Specialist at the Oregon Department of Education. I'm carrying forward a adoption of a temporary rule on the tribal attendance pilot project. So after the release of a study from the Chalkboard Project, the condition of education for Oregon's tribal students in January 2013, the Government-to-Government Education Cluster, a body comprised of representatives from each of Oregon's 9 federally recognized tribes, submitted a policy option package to solicit state funding to reduce chronic absenteeism among Native American students. The study revealed nearly 1/3 of Native American students in all grades are chronically absent, while all other students are less than 1/5 chronically absent. This year, the Oregon legislature set aside $1.5 million to reduce chronic absenteeism of Native students. This project is referred to as the Tribal Attendance Pilot Project, TAP. As a lead in the solicitation of the funding source, the Government-to-Government Education Cluster requested participation in the selection of schools and districts to receive funds. Each of Oregon's 9 tribes, federally recognized tribes, have identified a school or district to participate in TAP. Specifically, each participating school or district will receive an estimated $150,000 to hire a family advocate position with deep local connections to create a school-wide initiative to chronic absenteeism. The intent of the collaboration is to strengthen the links between the tribes and the schools and to serve enrolled tribal members. However, because this is a school-wide initiative, it will positively impact the attendance of every student attending those schools. The remaining $150,000 will be used by Oregon Department of Education to mount a broad-based messaging campaign about the importance of school attendance, to provide technical assistance and training for the family advocate cohort, and to monitor and report of the effectiveness of the pilots. During the December Government-to-Government Education Cluster Gathering, it was confirmed that all 9 tribes have selected focus school districts for the pilot project. These are located in Coos, Douglas, Harney, Klamath, Lincoln, Umatilla, Wasco, and Yamhill counties. Letters to the district superintendents will be mailed upon the approval of this temporary rule. As many departments, organizations, and agencies are working on a variety of issues pertaining to chronic absenteeism across the state, the ODE has created a TAP technical advisory panel comprised of leaders in this topic to support the TAP participants. Any questions? Yes,
I
Terry.
have one. A while back, I had a chance to be in a meeting with foundations, and they were talking about why so many of their initiatives weren't successful. And I thought maybe it was a time to talk about duration. And I see that this is a one-time appropriation. It seems to me that and maybe there's answers in here that I haven't seen, but it seems to me that we would just kind of get going, and then possibly the funding would run out. And then the district, like in many grants, has a choice of cutting something that's already there or funding. So and maybe there's a good reason for that, but I'm wondering, why did the legislature make it just a one-time appropriation for this important thing?
Honestly, do not have an answer on that.
Yeah, when the request came in, it was a request, I think, as Tabitha said, largely from the tribes, and the request was kind of, I think, focusing on this biennium specifically, to ask for this. They were springboarding, off of the study specifically. I don't know that I've heard anyone say, oh, absolutely not, that we're going to ask for that, next session or, next biennium to continue, but I think that this was a starting place. It's kind of building, you're talking about those other foundations. This was definitely kind of laying the groundwork with the, the study, and now, okay, this is the next step. And then I haven't heard yet what the third step is, but.
So it's a pilot. And
Yeah.
I think the inherent problem with pilot projects is, just as you say, and we do see a lot of them in Indian country.
Yeah.
I've been working in Indian education for 35 years in the state of Oregon, and we've seen a lot of pilots. I just think that if we can gain enough traction on the body of information we create in order to say this is what was successful in Coquille, or this is what was successful in Grand Ronde, and hopefully build that case that we do have methodologies that once created, community specific, do make improvements. I think that, it will be heard.
So maybe this is a kind of gathering of evidence to come back later and indicate, we just got started, we've made these gains, we'd like to see it move forward. Maybe that's what's the approach here.
And I think
Well,
it has.
Jerome, I'm sorry,
That's okay, go
Tabitha. We actually had this conversation, Tabitha and I, over the strategic funds that we received last time and trying to, we sent all this money out for American Indian, culturally relevant, yada, yada, that long title we give it. And, we know what they did, but how do we collect that and disseminate it to other districts? And we're still working on that. But my point being is that one of the things that it is a non-competitive funding because these are pre-selected sites or schools, but we are requesting proposals. And in that proposal, we have included a sustainability component. And so putting some ownership, or not ownership, but we want to see it last for a long time, whatever these best practices, or it could be a program or it could be a service. I mean, I'm really anxious to see what these different sites develop. But we did look at that, and we did right now we're requesting a 2-year sustainability beyond this cycle of funding.
That's good to hear. Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And maybe the other thing I'd like to add is that there's two things that are kind of exciting about it. The first is that, all 9 tribes are participating.
Good.
Which even the chalkboard project, we only had 7. So we have all 9 tribes already bought in, already excited to do something. And then the idea of creating a positive dialogue within those districts, with their children, around their children, but also having a program that benefits the whole school. I think that those are 3 big pieces that maybe haven't happened before in Indian education, and I think they're really important in terms of creating, again, this collaborative community kind of effort that can really blossom into something much more useful in discussions.
Thank you.
And useful also means chances of it going longer term
Absolutely.
with local funding too.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Well, the tribes have invested, Grand Ronde's invested huge amounts of money into providing helpers at the schools. Warm Springs has community people who come into the schools. To kind of formalize that kind of integration in the schools, I think will also be really exciting.
Okay. And Angela, you were present at the last Gov to Gov meeting that we had, education cluster meeting that we brought some additional information for. Do you anything to add?
You both just handled it so well. You did. You're wonderful. There.
Anything additional from the board?
Yes.
Concerns or
before we vote,
feedback?
I declare I have a potential conflict of interest.
Oh.
And that I serve as Education Director for the Confederated Tribes of Kuslo-Umpqua and Siuslaw as my salaried job. And I also represent them at our government-to-government meetings.
Okay. Is that an official?
Yeah, it's on the record.
Okay.
She can still vote, but
She can
it's on
still
the
vote?
it's on the record.
Okay, perfect. Okay. All right, well, we have a temporary rule before us for adoption.
So moved,
I
Madam
knew I could
Chair.
rely on you. How about a second? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes.
Yeah.
I want to just thank the board for all of its support.
We want to thank you
It's been
for
great.
doing a lot of heavy lifting.
Well, anything I could do, but honestly, thank you, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, ladies. Okay. Okay, do we have people here for proposed revision of Oregon mathematic graduation requirements?
We're here.
Oh, you're here?
They snuck in the back.
Okay, why don't we, since we did take a little break, why don't we press on, and we may take another one depending on, so.
Exhaustion.
Yes, it's been a heavy day.
Has been.
Okay, please state your names for the record.
Madam Chair and Board of Education, my name's Dawn Huckabee, and I am the new Assistant Superintendent for Instruction and Standards, and I've been on the job now for a month. And so I'm pleased to be here and sitting here the whole day just to see how you interact and how I can better serve you as well in your decisions as you move forward.
All day, huh?
I've been here all day. Although as I looked at some of the agenda as we move later, there may be some things I might slip out for. But I'd like to introduce Janelle Ives. Janelle is our lead in our teaching and learning team, and also Mark Freed. He is our math specialist. And we have two items here. One is around the revision of Oregon math graduation requirements and a proposal around some work that we need to do there, and then also to move towards adopting an instructional materials cycle. And so I'm going to turn it over to
Janelle first. For the record, I'm Janelle Ives, and there's a little bit of a misprint. This is an informational item for you, so I just wanted, you don't have to make any decisions, so you can relax your brains for a second.
So just to be clear, both of them are?
No, just the first one.
Okay.
Just the first one is information.
The second one will be, so relax.
Relax a little bit.
You can relax a little bit. No decision making for this. And we're bringing to you information about some of the work that ODE is undertaking to align high school math with the changes occurring in the math pathways at the post-secondary level. In the spring of 2015, the Higher Education Coordinating Commission and the Oregon Higher Education Institutions approved changes to the Associate of Arts in Oregon transfer degree to remove the intermediate algebra as a prerequisite for the college-level mathematics course. This change was prompted by work undertaken by faculty from a wide range of disciplines and determined that the mathematical needs of their disciplines. Intermediate algebra is a step on the calculus pathway, and there is an acknowledgement that there are math pathways other than calculus that meet the needs for many disciplines and careers. So we will be convening a group of math practitioners from secondary and post-secondary institutions of education to ensure that there are multiple math pathways available in high school that align with this work being done in higher education. Mark Freed, our math specialist, will talk a little bit more about this context.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and the members of the board for this opportunity to share a little bit of information about an important topic and raise your awareness of that will be happening very soon. It's exciting work that we'll be engaging in. Just for context, for the past 6 years, it's been my, I guess I'd say, privilege to help our districts align their high school math courses to the new graduation requirements. And I would just like to first just recognize some of the great work that has happened in our state to reform secondary mathematics. To put it in context, the important situation that was happening like 7-8 years ago was a number of our high school students were enrolled in high school remedial math classes that we would consider elementary or middle school mathematics. To kind of frame it, I would say some of our students were stuck in what I would call endless arithmetic. They were in a high school class all the way to graduation and never had a chance to engage in, say, high school algebra content. Today, with our new graduation requirements, all Oregon students have access to algebra content in high school. If they're in a course that is below that level, the students are awarded elective credits. And so you have to be at the Algebra 1 or higher level to get a mathematics credit now. So that is important work that I think was a heavy lift on our Oregon math teachers, and certainly we want to continue and moving forward. However, now that our students are taking Algebra 1, and that's where they're starting their high school journey, there's a number of questions about what options they have after algebra. That's kind of the issue has been coming up. And I would kind of frame the new issue that we're facing today is some of our students are stuck in what I would call endless algebra. Pre-calculus is kind of a algebra course itself, and so we have situations of students who might be taking 2-3 years of algebra in high school, and the reward is they get to take a year of algebra in college, the freshman year, and not have opportunities to engage in other content such as stats and probability or computer science or other things we know that are important in mathematics. So what we like to open the conversation is what other options do our students have? And we're also hearing from the mathematics community and business industry and higher education that we want more from our high school students. We want them to not only engage in content, but we want to display these practices, higher order thinking skills, communication, modeling, and application of what they're using. And so all this puts a lot of demands on our high school math teachers. And it's a lot to fit in 3 credits. And so what's exciting to me right now is with the work happening in higher education, what's happening is the higher ed has acknowledged that there needs to be an alternate pathway to college algebra. And they're working on that, and the communities are convening, and it's great work. And what the proposal is really for this work group is to expand that conversation to K-12. That we want to have higher ed and high school teachers to talk about what the work is happening at both our institutions, and really the proposed work
with each other.
Yes, absolutely. And really the work is to align both content expectations. We want prepare students for entry-level mathematics courses, so we want to be specific about what types of content we want our students to be able to do, but also I think we want to align pathways, so pathways align to each other so that we can help our students have a smooth transition from K-12 to post-secondary. And so it's really exciting work that's starting. This is, I think, an opportunity and time to really engage our mathematics community and unleash some innovation about how we can meet the needs of all our students to prepare them to be college and career ready in our schools.
And we brought this item before you because this work group may have some recommendations of refinements for the requirements for math for graduation. So we wanted you to be aware of the work so there were no surprises if we brought forward recommendations to refine those at a future time.
Yes.
Is part of this work also with the equity component where many children of color did not have access to post-algebra, therefore they didn't have a snowball's chance of going on to post-secondary, particularly the tougher, if you will, post-secondary institutions. Is there attention to the role that math and more often post-algebra played in terms of being a barrier to kids going on?
I think there's certainly going to be attention to our admission process and how we help educate all the people, all the stakeholders involved in the process, and then we recognize that there's not a single course that's going to be a pathway to being ready for college. So I think if we create more alternatives to this, that they be rigorous, they be aligned to our high school standards, and they also be recognized by our institutions that they are preparing our students for these college courses.
And there is comparable work going on around accelerated learning and opportunities for all students to participate that, and really in targeting those students who are ready but not taking advantage of those courses, and why are they not taking advantage, and what cultural shifts can we do at school systems to make sure that those students are being well informed and included and feel welcomed into those courses.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yes.
One of the things that it's just keeps popping up is that when we make changes and for content and just classes and all that, but I'm most concerned about the teachers, the professionals that need to adjust to what they were doing, and now they have to. And so I don't know if this runs parallel or is intertwined, but that professional development, I just want to advocate for the teachers that there's professional development time and implementation, because if there's changes, I hear that, like, okay, you're adding one thing, and then what are you going to take off the plate? But even if we add or take or not add something, that whatever the changes, that we take that into serious consideration, because at the end of the day, they're going to be the ones sitting in front of the students, and hopefully that they've already had that professional development training, or have opportunity so that they're maximizing, their efforts with the students and diverse population that may, so I just wanted to advocate for the teachers in that respect.
Thank you. I think that's definitely an ideal and a goal.
Okay.
Okay, just one thought. So what about maybe getting them, holding hands with science teachers, math and science combined, getting them out of the classroom into like biology experiences with the Forest Service or fish and wildlife, the like water flow and temperature, all that combines to make for good habitat. That's just a couple ideas that comes to mind right away, but students may just really like to apply some of that information they get outside the classroom. It's invigorating, it's interesting, they learn more than just math. Okay, that's all, thanks.
Yes, definitely. You are on the right track.
I think that's certainly part of the hope of this work is like we want to infuse those applications in high school. We need to help, our teachers not have so much content to have to cover. So I think that the good news is I believe we can help focus the content and allow for more of those opportunities within our classrooms and encourage that as well.
Chair Sommer, a while back, the ACT did some work on trying to figure out where the crucial points were for students in taking coursework and then their success after high school. And at least at that time, it was courses taken in the 8th grade. That 8th grade course selection really tracked kids for what was going to happen after that. And I'm not asking for any changes on this. I just want to get some information from you folks. Are we trying to get Algebra 1 more embedded at the 8th grade level for coursework that students are taking rather than having it be the gateway requirement in the 9th grade? And in addition to the ACT, I know internationally that we tend to lag quite a bit in terms of our students taking more rigorous math at an early age. So again, it isn't really related to this, but I'm just wondering from your expertise what you think about that.
Well, our new state standards, I would say, when we did the crosswalk analysis between our Common Core standards and the prior Oregon math standards, I would say I taught high school and middle school, and I would probably half of my Algebra 1 content is somewhere in the 6th, 8th grades now. And so like a lot of the linear functions, a lot of the tables, I mean, that is an expectation. The students are introduced to those concepts. And so I don't know if it's an algebra course in 8th grade, but they're definitely being exposed to algebra content. And I think in high school, what I hope to turn that into is I might be introduced to a line in 7th or 8th grade, but now I get to really use it and deepen my knowledge. It's kind of like I can teach you the rules of chess in a few minutes, but it takes a longer time to really master it. And so I think those mastery opportunities was what we want to build on. And so I think the content is there in middle school. And I think that's one, hopefully, the clarifications when we focus on a content conversation versus course conversation. We can get to what content we really want our students to be doing in high school to prepare them for what 100 level math classes in college are expecting them to be able to do from day one.
Do either of the two of you have any comments on that? Any thoughts?
I mean, I think that is key, that we have those equitable practices and exposure to those content discussions in middle school. And so part of the Common Core adoption has been to really provide those. Now, that ongoing support for teachers and districts to implement it needs to happen as well.
So is that, Madam Chair, is that also integrated in our next generation science standards as well, or is there some kind of connection between those? Because it just seems to me that in many of the next generation science standards, the math content becomes a critical component to that. I mean, one should never make policy on one's own life, but I didn't care a fig about algebra until I became a pre-engineering major and in high school, and then wanted to be able to do some good sine cosine work in terms of surveying or electronics. I mean, for a lot of kids, one avenue, and that's why I liked what you said about pathways. One avenue leads to another, and the reasoning behind it, the framework, then becomes something that makes sense. Are we doing that?
We're working towards that, and I think there are examples that are. So
Thank you.
there are definitely examples out there that are doing that work, and we're gonna get there. Should we move on to the next item? Okay. The next item is.
Do we need to vote on that?
No, it's just,
that was just information.
it's the information item for you.
So the next item is a first reading of proposed instructional materials review schedule, and we will be asking the board to make a decision at your next scheduled meeting. And Mark will provide you some context of the revision to this calendar.
Yes, so again, back to a little background. In 2010, we did adopt math and ELA standards simultaneously, which was kind of unprecedented, I think, to adopt two major content areas at the same time. And again, we adopted the Next Gen Science standards. And each of those subject areas were off our review schedule. And so we've been kind of in this kind of, I would say, holding pattern, trying to figure out how to get through the review of materials. We just completed a math review this last summer. That list is on our site, and we just toured the state to do instructional materials caravan. So a lot of districts are very interested in moving towards adoption of math materials this school year. We're doing a science review next year, so we're going to repeat the process. So we're on track for that. Our schedule stops at science, so we don't have anything on our site about what's happening after that. And so there's a number of content areas that we are responsible for beyond English, mathematics, and science. We have health and PE standards, we have social studies standards, we have world languages, and we have the arts, are all subject areas that we like to get back into the fold. And so our proposal is, since we've been off schedule, so let's start with the ELA adoption that happened in 2014. So we had ELA in 2014, the summer 2014 review. We had this 2015. We had that was the ELA adoption for districts in 2014. So we had ELL, ELP after that, and mathematics would be fall 2016 in schools. We will build out that schedule. That's what you have in your handout, is kind of our proposed schedule from that. So we have ELA, ELP, math, science. That's all we have on our calendar right now. After that, we're proposing kind of going back to kind of big, smaller adoptions for our district. So health and arts is something that we want to get back on our radar, and so we put that after science. Social studies is generally a bigger adoption, so we put that after health and arts, and then world language is proposed at the end of the cycle. And so what we're proposing then is I wanted to show, copy paste, build that out for the next 7 years as well, because this schedule has a lot of implications for both content review and assessments. And so I think having information like that, getting back on a schedule, is something we like to recommend for the board. So again, this is just for a first read today, and we're proposing adoption in January. So if there's any questions or clarifications, we need to understand the new schedule.
Questions or comments from the board?
Well, as a former social studies teacher, I wish you'd speed up that cycle.
Actually, social studies would be about on schedule if we keep it where it is.
Yeah, I talked to Andrea last week about how we're going to buffer.
All right.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How's everyone feeling?
Let's go for it.
Going?
Yeah.
Do we have somebody here for ADMW for charter schools?
Rick.
I thought so. Welcome back. I have to stretch. I stood up for you.
Well, Madam Chair, I will say, actually, I'm waiting on two of my staff members to hopefully pop in here any moment, because they are the experts in terms of this particular presentation, so
We
hopefully we
can
will see
shuffle
them
you
shortly.
around,
Yeah,
actually. I see a red sweater back there that's very excited to join me. So
you know, he's always that way. So
Yeah, I was gonna say, he can always use a little.
guys a little bit.
I'm certainly happy to defer to Mr. Kruska.
Yes. Me too, actually. Go ahead. Go for it.
The presentation?
Just for Eli, in case you have questions.
Yeah. She's Eli.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Sarah Drinkwater, Assistant Superintendent for Student Services, and I have two colleagues with me who will be discussing about human sexuality and administration of prescription and non-prescription medication to students. This is a first reading for both. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Mitch Kruska, Director of Educational Programs, Oregon Department of Education.
And I'm Emily Nazarov. I'm in the Government Legal Affairs section.
We're here today, as Dr. Drinkwater mentioned, to do a first read on rule adoption. Both of these are based on legislative action that was taken in the 2015 legislative session, and so we're bringing to you today the opportunity to review the proposed rules. The first rule amends the human sexuality rule. The proposed rule amends OAR 581-022-1440, Human Sexuality Education, which outlines the state's requirements for instruction around human sexuality education. The 2015 legislature passed Senate Bill 856, which requires school districts to provide 4 instructional sessions yearly, K-12, on sexual abuse prevention. These rules have been incorporated into the OAR 581-022-144, as shown in the accompanying attachments, specifically adding language to Section 2 addressing district requirements for adopting instructional programs, and then also adding Section 9, which defines the instructional program requirements of the bill.
So the bill specifies that it's K through 12? That wasn't an editorial?
The bill, to be honest with you, Chair Summer, the bill was very vague. It says 4 sessions, K-12, and that's pretty much all it said. And it said that there would be an adoption of rules. So if you look at the rules that we added, we literally took the language from the bill and put it in here. So you have that as part of the comprehensive plan of human sexuality, each school district board shall adopt a child sexual abuse prevention instruction program for students in kindergarten through grade 12. And then in Section 9, it specifically says, as part of the comprehensive plan on sexuality instruction, each school district shall provide child sexual abuse prevention instruction from kindergarten through grade 12. School districts must provide a minimum of 4 instructional sessions per year. 1 instructional session is equal to 1 standard class period. There was no clarification on whether that meant if you do 4 sessions at 4th grade, you've covered the law.
Yeah.
Does it mean you do 4 sessions at 9th grade, you've covered the law? That was not defined or clarified in the law, so it's not clarified in the rule. We essentially took what was in the law and put it into the rule.
So leave up to the district, right?
It essentially, yes. Remember, that's exactly what it does. And that's what we did, because again, it directs the district to do that. It just directs ODE to adopt language telling them they have to do it. So that's what it is.
I have a daughter in kindergarten, and during our first parent session at the school, somebody raised their hand and said, I hear kindergartners are going to be taught about sex. And so I immediately, when I read this, thought, oh.
Yeah. And again, it specifically addresses sexual abuse prevention, not necessarily.
And very important.
Absolutely.
I just know that there's a lot of room here for extrapolation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, by all means.
Just the whole practice, I mean, just what you mentioned, I mean, if you teach it 4 times to 4th graders, well, what happens with everybody? It's like, what's anybody's thought on the practice of this? Because obviously that is very important for safety issues. So, we're just stuck, stand still, this is what it is, and we're leaving it to the school district.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
The bill actually lays out a few more things, and when we reviewed the bill, and Eli Sanders, who's our sexual health specialist, he's away at a conference this week, what he testified at the legislature last spring was much of what was in the bill is already being done in our schools. We have standards for health and sexual education that show each year what should be taught, and it's age appropriate, developmentally appropriate. And so it's already in those standards, and so it didn't need to be put in great detail in the rule.
That's what I wanted to know.
Yes, thank you, great.
Mhm.
Yes, thank you for covering that, that's a good point. Okay.
Okay, set up the pins and knock the rest down.
Let's move on to the next one. The next one is amends the administration of prescription and non-prescription medication. The proposed rule amends OAR 581-021-0037, the administration of prescription and non-prescription medication. The 2015 legislature passed Senate Bill 875, House Bill 3041, and House Bill 3149. Senate Bill 875 directs the board to adopt rules under which district personnel may administer medication to treat adrenal insufficiency in students experiencing adrenal crisis. Anticipating that there might be some questions about what is adrenal insufficiency, I brought some additional information that I'll share with the board. Adrenal insufficiency is also known as Addison's disease. It's a rare endocrine or hormonal disorder that affects about 1 in 1,000 people in the general population and equates to approximately 25 students statewide in the Oregon student population. The disease is characterized by weight loss, muscle weakness, fatigue, low blood pressure, and sometimes darkening of the skin in both exposed and non-exposed parts of the body. It occurs when the adrenal glands do not produce enough of the hormone cortisol, and in some cases, the hormone aldosterone. Treatment of Addison's disease involves replacing or substituting the hormones that the adrenal glands are not making. During an adrenal crisis, low blood pressure, low blood sugar, and high levels of potassium can be life-threatening. Standard therapy involves intravenous injections of hydrocortisone, saline, salt water, and dextrose, sugar. This treatment usually brings rapid improvement. So what this rule does is allows school staff to be trained in the use and administration of the intravenous injection for a student that's in adrenal crisis. House Bill 3041 directs school districts to allow students to use sun protective clothing such as hats and allow the application of non-prescription sunscreen when students are engaged in outside activities. Finally, House Bill 3149 allows a registered nurse employed by a school district or private school to accept an order from a physician licensed outside the state of Oregon if the order is related to the treatment of a student who has been enrolled at the school for not more than 90 days. These rules have been incorporated into this one OAR because they both apply to this OAR, as shown in the accompanying attachments before you today.
So the idea is to allow direction from an out-of-state medical professional for a kid that just moved here.
Correct.
For a short period of time.
Correct.
To establish care.
Correct. We have several districts that are on the borders of their states. A good example is Ontario. Many of the students in Ontario will go to Idaho to obtain services from a medical practitioner. This allows that order to come back to the school district and be implemented, and so the nurses can implement an out-of-state order. It specifically addresses the 90-day period for students who initially enroll.
Any questions, team? Comments?
All right.
Okay, thank you all.
You're welcome.
So moving backward, ADMW for charter schools. I think we have the whole, well, maybe not the whole team back.
We got the group.
Got part of the band back together.
We can cover it.
Make it work?
Yeah.
All right.
Madam Chair, again, for the record, Rick Krager, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Administration. We're here for a first reading of changes to the ADMW calculation as it relates to charter schools. This is specific to legislation passed last biennium, House Bill 2150. that makes these or creates these changes. So we are in need of some administrative rule changes. So I'm going to give it to Michael, and he will brief you on that.
Hello, Michael Elliott, State School Fund Coordinator for the record. So some of you may remember about 4 years ago, we were before the board asking to change how we calculated extended ADMW. The legislature 4 years ago passed House Bill 3417, which said charter schools would have their extended ADMW calculated separately from the rest of the district, and those two numbers added together for a district total. Brief history of extended ADMW. As you may know, ADMW is a weighted student average, so students get additional weights for being on an IEP or being in ELL services, that sort of thing. Extended ADMW simply compares the current year's ADMW with the prior year's ADMW and gives whichever is greater. So 3417 addressed a concern that districts with charter schools, where the charter school was seeing increasing enrollment, but the district was seeing declining enrollment, were not seeing the additional weights due to the increase in the charter enrollment, because the increase in the charter enrollment was much less than the overall district decrease. 3417 changed that and solved that problem. However, it created an unintended consequence that some districts were starting to think about creating charter schools simply to get a one-year bump in their ADMW. Basically, for smaller districts, they would double their ADMW for 1 year, getting a one-year increase in funding because of the way the extended ADMW worked. Legislature was concerned about this, and in 2015, they passed House Bill 2150 and stopped that practice. They also set up a couple other parts of the bill. The first is that the districts realized that the state legislature realized that some districts would be relying on charters, the extended ADMW, to help defray the expenses incurred in closing a charter school. So they allowed for those districts that have a charter school closing to get 5% of the charter school's ADMW in funds to the district to help close. And also, that's going forward. And then for 14-15, or for those charter schools closing in 15-16, only an additional 3% was allowed. So the rules are rewritten to reflect that. We completely changed out OAR 0230106. That has been completely deleted because that was all to implement the old House Bill 3417. And now we have asked to implement the new legislation, which is 2150, which basically says that charter school extended ADMW will not be calculated separately as per statute. The 5% and how that calculation works, the 3%, the requirements for that, and then also some, the fact that charter school ADMW, once it's closed, won't be included in the extended ADMW as well. So it's borderline technical change. There is some policy choices that we've had to make in terms of how those quarterly reports look like, how the 5% will be calculated, and it will be calculated outside of the formula. We'll take an estimate, we'll give those districts an estimated amount, and then we'll reconcile based on actual ADM. So but that's the rule in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
So essentially, this is a step-down phase-out of that percentage that the district could take.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the board, it is a step down, is not a phase out. The 5% will be there for moving forward. Yes, the 3% is a step down. It was felt at the legislature that because no warning was being given to the districts that were affected right now in 2015-16, that they would get the additional 3%. However, moving forward, districts now are on notice that they're only going to get 5% for costs, and they can plan accordingly.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Additional questions, comments?
Okay. Well, we'll be back next time for vote. Thank you.
Okay, jumping back forward, we have some charter school waiver. And Kate is here, ready to go. Feel free to just segue through each, and then maybe we can talk about them all at the end, however works for you.
Great. Chair Summer, members of the board, my name is Kate Pattison, and I am the charter school specialist at the department in the office of the Deputy Superintendent. And today I'm here to present on 3 charter school waivers. And I have this laid out to give some background, and then we'll go through each waiver specifically. Since the establishment of the public charter school law, The Oregon State Board of Education has granted waivers according to ORS 338, Section 25, subsection 2, which states, upon application by a public charter school, the State Board of Education may grant a waiver of any provision of this chapter if the waiver promotes the development of programs by providers, enhances the equitable access by underserved families to the public education of their choice, extends the equitable access to public support by all students, or permits high-quality programs of unusual cost. On average, the State Board receives about 10 waivers requests each year from public charter schools across the state. The most common waiver request is for charter schools to give priority enrollment to students of founders and staff or employees. Twice, the State Board has approved waivers to allow students from two different charter schools from these two different charter schools who live within a particular geographic boundary to have priority enrollment. And the State Board has also considered waivers related to virtual charter schools, the location of a charter school outside of the sponsoring boundary, and teacher licensure requirements. In August of 2014, the State Board began a rigorous discussion on public charter school waivers, including ethics, equity, and the waiver process itself. This discussion led to a separate work session in April of 2015. The work session concluded with an updated procedure that includes an equity lens and requires contact with the sponsoring district to help guide charter schools in addressing the criteria in 338025. The 3 waiver requests before you today are the first reading of 3 waiver requests and the first request the State Board has received under the updated process. Now I'm going to explain each of these. So they're all first reads.
How did just generally speaking, how did the new process work for you on your end?
I think that it worked really well. So it outlined a solid process. It strengthened some of the requirements in terms of reaching out to the district and ensuring that we actually had written communication. It required that the requests themselves included some more rigor and some explanation. So it gave me more to work with in evaluating the request itself. I think the 3 that are before you today, in some ways, offered their own challenges with that, and you'll hear that as we go through each one, particularly that most charter schools that we have in Oregon are schools that are developed kind of on their own from the community, and a new school is born. And the 3 that we're talking about today are converted neighborhood schools. So there's certain, differences there. All right, so the first waiver request before you today is from the Imbler Charter School. This school is the only public school in the district and was converted to a public charter school in 2008. The Imbler Charter School is requesting a waiver of ORS 338, Section 125, to allow children of staff to be given priority enrollment. Staff hired by the charter school have a difficult time finding affordable housing within the district boundary due to a variety of constraints on new construction and limitations on available properties. The charter school explained in their letter how housing prices are so high that most new staff cannot afford to live within the school district boundary. Providing this waiver will allow children of staff who live outside the district boundary to enroll their children in the public charter school. Currently, there are only 7 children of staff who would be affected by this, which is less than 3% of the charter school's enrollment. This waiver request was submitted by the school district superintendent, who also serves, I believe, as the principal for the charter school. And so there is full support from the district because they're kind of organized as one unit. This waiver will not limit the access to students who currently reside within the district boundary. So all students who live within the district will still be able to attend the public charter school. In the letter, the charter school provides some rationale related to the financial burden on staff to locate within the district boundary, and it is reasonable to conclude that the waiver will support the ongoing development of the program through teacher recruitment and retention. The department recommends approving the waiver for the duration of the charter contract not to exceed 5% of the total student enrollment receiving the priority. Consistent with guidance from the Ethics Commission, the public charter school should incorporate this as a benefit for all employees in their contracts. And the department will ask that the public charter school maintain records related to applications, lotteries, wait lists, and enrollment during the lifetime of the waiver in anticipation of any requests that the state board might have, or if they were to come back and ask for this waiver again, that we would have that data to present. So that's the first waiver.
Kate, why is it that it seems like we keep hearing these waivers? I know there's a ton of other charter schools that have the same benefit. I haven't seen any of them. Why do I feel like we only hear from a couple of schools on this issue? Is it because their agreement for their waiver is shorter, or what?
I think, Chair
Or am I
Summer,
imagining things?
what happens is most of the waivers for these are tied to charter contracts, and so we just see them staggered throughout. That's my best answer.
When they come up for renewal.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Would you like me to move on to the next one?
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe we'll talk at the end.
Sure.
if we-
The second waiver is for the Sauvie Island Academy Charter School, which is sponsored by the Scappoose School District and is located on Sauvie Island. The charter school was established in 2011 when the Scappoose School District voted to close the island's elementary school, and the community converted it to a public K-8 charter school. The public charter school now serves over 200 students using a place-based model and curriculum that draws from the unique environment, island culture, and agriculture on the island. This waiver request is similar to two other waivers that the charter school has received from the board. They are requesting a waiver of ORS 338125 to allow children of staff, founders, and island residents to be given priority enrollment. The waiver request was communicated to the school district, and there is a letter in your packet of support from the school district. As we evaluated this request, in light of the criteria for equitable access, we considered the families who live on the island who qualify for free and reduced lunch and migrant families. While these families do not make up a large percentage of the students on the island, due to the geographic size of the island and the limited access to other public school options, and the number of applicants from off-island students, we determined that the waiver would support the students who might have more barriers to attend school. As of this school year, 19 students have received priority enrollment, which equates to about 9% of the students in the school. Additionally, allowing staff children to have priority enrollment supports the school in recruiting and retaining staff who are committed to the mission of the school and ensuring a high-quality program. Because of the distance and time required to travel on and off the island during peak traffic times, staff with school-aged children may find it to be a financial and time burden to have students attend other public schools in the surrounding areas. Additionally, since the island properties are limited, it is not practical for staff to relocate to the island. And as of this school year, 10 students have received priority enrollment, which is less than 5% of the total school's enrollment. The department recommends approving the waiver for the duration of the charter contract to allow children of staff, founders, and island residents to be given priority enrollment. Consistent with the guidance from the Ethics Commission, we would also encourage the school to include that as a benefit for their employees, and we'll work with the school to ensure that they maintain appropriate records and data, so that if and when we would expect them to come back and request this waiver again, we would be able to have that data to present to you.
Chair Summer, Kate, I notice on the superintendent's letter that he has crossed out founders. So it says on his letter, staff,
Not doing founders.
children, but not founders.
Okay, so we, Chair Summer and Director Colonna, we were negotiating with the charter school on what their specifics were going to be, and that is, I apologize for that. We should cross founders out of this, so they're only asking for staff and island residents at this point.
Weren't they originally, Founders was originally when they.
Originally in the first waiver.
Right, in the
yes.
first contract, yeah.
Right, but now founders are not, any additional founders who aren't already enrolled in, children who aren't already enrolled in the school are not going to receive additional priority if this waiver is approved. So we're just looking at staff and on-island residents.
Thank you.
Coburg?
Third waiver request is for the Coburg Community Charter School, which is sponsored by the Eugene School District and is located about 8 miles outside of Eugene. The charter school was established in 2011 when the 4J School District voted to close the elementary school, and the community converted it to a public K-8 charter school. The public charter school serves about 225 students. This waiver request is similar to 2 other waivers that this board has approved for the charter school. They are requesting a waiver of ORS 338-125 to allow students who live within the former attendance boundary for the former Coburg Elementary School to be given priority enrollment for up to 50% of the total school enrollment. The waiver request was communicated to the school district, and the school district does not have any concerns with this waiver. I have a copy of that email. As we evaluated this request, in light of the criteria for equitable access, we considered the families who live in Coburg and who qualify for free and reduced lunch. While these families do not make up a large percentage of the students in the community, due to the distance from other Eugene schools, the resources needed for families to participate in the education of students in the schools outside of their community, and the number of applications that the public charter school receives from suburban students in the area, we determined this waiver would support the students who might have more barriers to attending the public school in their neighborhood. The past waiver was supported, all the past waivers they've had have supported almost all local students who seek enrollment in the public charter school. Currently, the school has 222 students, and 74 of those students reside in the former attendance boundary, so that's about 33%. So they're asking for their waiver for up to 50% be given to priority within that former attendance boundary. They currently have 33%. The department recommends approving the waiver for the duration of the charter contract to allow children who reside within the former attendance boundary to be given priority enrollment up to 50%. And again, we will work with the charter school to ensure that they're maintaining data related to applications, lotteries, wait lists, and enrollment to ensure that if they were to come back, we'd have data to present. I do have, if you're interested, data that was prepared by the Coburg Community Charter School. That gives a little bit more detail about the numbers of students who have been impacted by these waivers in the past.
So I remember in a previous, I think, waiver request, a lot of information about the students on Sauvie Island, having them have to go off island for education was just a crazy endeavor. It was just, the travel was so rigorous that I think it would have a significant impact on their education. What is the purpose of the preference for the Coburg?
Coburg?
Location limitation, like what is the benefit?
As they've explained in their letter, and I think in past, formalities, Chair Summer, members of the board. As they've explained in their letter and at past presentations, a lot of it has to do with the mission of the school and the founding of the community school in the Coburg community. And so they're really geared around being that community school that is the hub of the neighborhood where all the students who live there would be able to flourish. And so in support of their mission and the way that they have designed their school program from the formation when it was converted, when the school was going to be closed, they're really targeting and trying to serve the students who live right in that area. And they have capacity to serve more than those students. They're just trying to make sure that any students who do live there do have access to their neighborhood school.
Additional questions or comments?
I have one. Kate, are you saying that all the students in Coburg would get a chance to be in the school first before any of the others that might be outside the district would have an opportunity to enroll?
Yes, Chair Summer and Director Colonna, yes.
Okay. And secondly, and I know it's, I don't mean to make more work, but I would really feel better if when we vote on this in January, if we could have a formal letter from the superintendent. I know his chief of staff has checked with him and everything's okay, but I just personally would feel better about that.
Chair Summer, yes, that's
We
no
can
problem.
request it, right? Anything else? Okay.
Okay, do you want to talk about just a little bit about how maybe moving forward, these will be coming back as a consent agenda item?
I think given they're going to be.
Well, just future waivers, I think we talked about that.
Right, so Chair Summer, members of the board, this has been, a long conversation we've been having on waivers, and we've spent a lot of time working on that and having a strong process that we found to work really well right now. And I think as we receive additional waivers that look a little different, we'll get more information, and there'll also be really strong data-driven kind of requests before you. We would hope that as we get waivers that are similar to waivers that you've approved, we would be able to put them on the consent agenda in an aim to alleviate kind of the time that the board would need to spend on them while still providing the same level of information in the dockets.
How do board members feel about that?
I still have a little bit of difficulty if I don't know that all the students in the neighborhood have access before any of the exceptions are made. So if that could be clarified.
I think she's talking about it generally as a practice.
Yeah.
So something I think we struggle with is that the board's perception that the charter school work is taking up significant time on our agenda. So we're trying to sort of do that work outside of the board and instead with ODE. And so I think the question, because we've tried things like creating a charter subcommittee, that doesn't work. We're trying to streamline this process. And so we have to figure out whether we think that we've been successful or not yet with that. What do you all think?
I think it's emerging. We did try the subcommittee for almost a year. I think that helped us sort of line things up as to what are our questions generally about. But again, as Ms. Pattison has pointed out, there's sometimes some real varieties. Sauvie Island's an island, and so it's in some ways with, essentially one bridge over to St. John's, and, you got to cross over to the other side first, and then you have choice of either going to St. John's or up to Scappoose. There are some real different logistics with respect to that. So to keep in mind being flexible about what each situation presents, and at the same time having some more of the categorical responses attended to. I'm feeling like we've made some progress with respect to that, and if there are no issues raised, that it's fine to put it in the consent agenda. But when an issue is raised that we need some successive information about, I think then we need to make it one of our action items. That's my take on it.
Does that help with the question?
Yeah, so Chair Summer and directors, I think, what I'm hearing is definitely if there's a waiver that is something that is different that you haven't heard under the new policy, our expectation already was that we would bring it to you as a first read or at least an action item for discussion. What I would ask is a consideration that maybe these particular charter schools that are now going through the process, if they come back and they have a school that, is still in support from their district and have been renewed and they ask for this waiver again and the numbers are not dramatically different, that we might be able to put a similar waiver request on the consent agenda. But that is up to your purview.
I think Jerry's point is a good one, that in order to do that, I'd want some sort of real official affirmation from the local school board or superintendent. All you can do is ask. Honestly, we can't make them provide us with that, I assume, right? We can't, can we?
I don't think-
We can say we won't take action until you've done this.
I don't think that it will be difficult to get a letter.
Yeah.
Okay.
Additional sounds good.
Comments? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Doing pretty good, you guys.
We're an hour ahead.
By an hour ahead, you mean generally on time?
Something like that, yeah. That's bureaucratic speak for.
We're way ahead.
Well, we're way ahead from
Except
our
for- yeah, except we
third
threw-
revision.
Except we threw an agenda
Let's
out
see what we
there.
can do about that.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Board. We're back. Again, Mitch Kruska, Director of Educational Programs, Oregon Department of Education. We're here today to present to you folks a first read on the adoption of a contractor for Oregon's alternate, what's known as the Extended Assessment Aligned to Common Core Standards. Now, let's see if this, yep, there we go. The first slide here addresses what was already approved by the board, which is a timetable for the department to review the current contractor or current contract for the alternative assessment and determine whether or not we should consider an alternative or another company or agency to provide the alternate assessment. The idea behind this was, since the board was already reviewing and the department was already looking at the state-wide general ed assessment, that we should probably follow the same process for the alternative assessment to stay consistent and in line with that. So as a result, in 2013-14 and 2014 and 15, while the Department of Ed was going through the adoption of the SBAC, we were preparing for going through the same process with BRT, who is our current contractor. In 2015-16, we anticipated that BRT would continue that if we were to bring a new contractor on board. At that time, in 14-15, we actually completed a field test with BRT, and then this year we submitted, the department offered a request for information for vendors to reach out to us and let us know if they were interested in becoming a vendor for the Department of Ed. And then at that time, we reviewed the application. So we did do an RFI. We received 8 responses to that RFI with contractors or agencies that said that they were interested. We convened a work group comprised of educators and key stakeholders to review those options and the look at the proposals that were presented to us. And to choose, we asked that group to choose their top 2 choices that will best serve Oregon students and schools, and from that, ODE would make a final recommendation to the board regarding which contractor we would prefer to work with. The work group met on July 17th to review the initial RFI responses, and then on October 9th to go into more depth and actually provide 2 choices to the Department of Ed. The work group included a wide range of educational stakeholders, including district leadership, special education leaders, a board member, post-secondary constituent, and also educational partner organizations. The following is a list of the work group panelists: Mary Apple from Intermountain ESD, Todd Bludquist from Grants Pass, Stephen Jones from Three Rivers, Mary Morton, your Board of Education advisor, Karen Power from Pendleton, Ken Costco from Western Oregon University, and Bill Stewart from the Gladstone School District. Per the work group's charge, they did identify 2 alternative assessment option contractors for ODE to consider: the American Institutes of Research, and then the Behavioral Research and Teaching Institute from the University of Oregon, again, our current contractor. I'm going to abbreviate this. Following the work group review process, ODE convened an internal team to evaluate the work group's recommended choices and rationale for each of the recommendations. ODE's analysis of the work group's recommendation really hinged on one key factor. Of the 2 recommended providers, only BRT has an actual functioning assessment. AIR presented a proposal around what they would look like if they were to create an actual assessment, but they don't have a currently functioning assessment. It would require the department to go through the process of, 1, abandoning a successful assessment already in place. BRT has provided our alternative assessment for the last 7 years, very successfully, would require us to develop an entirely new assessment, take the field through the process of doing a field test for the new assessment, and then transition the field to a new assessment. So these considerations weighed heavily in ODE's decision-making process and ultimately led the department to decide to continue and recommend to the board that we continue with BRT as the state alternative assessment provider. Again, this is informational. We will come back to the board in January for final consent of that, and I am prepared to take any questions that you might have.
Question, gentlemen? Comments? Anybody want to do a dance? No?
When we're finally done. I'll save that exuberance.
Yes.
All right, thank you both.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So this will be on the consent agenda for
Yes.
January. Okay.
So, transition to English language proficiency assessment for the 21st century. Very curious what century we are coming from, that we're moving into the 21st. Derek, as you know, you always come late in the day, so you have 2 minutes.
Yeah, we might even be able to trim a little off that. We'll go fast.
We're actually doing very well.
It's good news. It's been a long day.
Where the heck is it? It's not on there. Oh, that is. Okay, there we go.
All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and jump in while we're getting the slides pulled up. My name's Derek Brown. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Assessment and Accountability here at ODE. Really happy to be joined today by Dr. Martha Martinez from our Equity Office and Dr. Kathleen Vanderwall, who is our Test Design and Implementation Manager up in the assessment shop. I know that we don't have a whole lot of time, and my colleagues are going to do most of the talking for you today. I'm going to just tee it up. As you know, we're transitioning to a new English language proficiency assessment that we refer to as ELPA 21. One of the things that we're also transitioning here in the days to come is the project director role in this effort. ELPA 21 is a multi-state consortium effort similar in nature to the Smarter Balanced work that we've done, and Oregon has been the lead state in many ways through this process. Kathleen has been serving as the project director for quite a while now, and I'm also sad to report to you today that today is Kathleen's last day. She's actually officially retiring from the department after 22 years.
Congratulations.
So
We didn't let people do that.
well, I did everything I could to sabotage her retirement, but it didn't work out. So, so we've
Congratulations.
we're very sad to see her go. We've transitioned the project director role to me over the course of the last couple of weeks, and so that's one of the important transitional activities for you to be aware of as we're preparing very soon for the ELPA 21 to be launched this February. So we're right on the doorstep of implementing this new assessment. With that, I'll hand it over to Kathleen and Martha to walk you through a few of the operational and policy details.
Thank you. And we want to just highlight the work of 2 of our colleagues in the audience. Holly Carter is our current consortium council representative for Oregon, and she's been very influential on the accountability and accessibility task management team. And Michelle McCoy is really, I have to say, the ELD experienced person who's the brains behind ELPA 21. And so we're very happy for all their work. And these are the states in the partnership. As we move to an operational summative assessment, it will be Washington, Oregon, Ohio, and Iowa will be using the American Institutes for Research as our vendor, following our directions and blueprints for the assessment. In terms of a project overview, this grant, some of you know, because we've been here a few times before, was about $10 million, called an Enhanced Assessment Grant from the U.S. Department of Education. Oregon is the fiscal agent, also the lead state, and we have taken lead state status very, very seriously. We're the only state in the union that's had an online semi-adaptive English language proficiency test ever, let alone for the last 8 years. So we have taken a very significant role in that regard. Our project management partner is the Council of Chief States School Officers, and the research evaluator is CREST, which you'll hear more about later because they are our willing partner to take on the next steps. PI. And the PI is Kenji Hakuta from Stanford University. In terms of the milestones, ooh, you animated us.
I didn't. That was
you
your.
didn't. I didn't know I knew how to do this. You all adopted.
You have so much more to offer. You can't retire today.
Right. You all adopted the ELPA 21 standards in October of 2013. And these standards correspond with the Common Core State Standards in Mathematics and English Language Arts, as well as the Next Generation Science Standards. So they have the deep language component that's needed in order for our English learners to be ready to fully use language to engage in the academic content. Lots of item development, which Michelle McCoy, I hope you're waving back there, kind of led. Cognitive labs, which has been a great addition to the work that we've traditionally done. It really kind of puts the work under a microscope so that we have a more objective basis for some of the decisions we're making. Field test last year, and what we're coming to tell you about right now is the summative assessment, and the window will open in February. And then we're happy to say that starting next August, there will be an ELPA 21 screener available. It will be the first time that the states have the opportunity to provide an English language proficiency screener that's fully aligned to our summative assessment. And it will be kind of in a test mode this year, you might say. Just another view of this, the ELPA, on the first row, Oregon's ELPA has been operational for about 8 years and was the assessment used last year. And at the same time, we provided the ELPA 21 field test. I think about 30 districts took part in that field test. And then the summative assessment will open very soon. And as all good things come, they're not always perfect. And our standard setting will occur in the summer. So this means that we won't actually have those performance levels associated with the ELPA 21 that we would love to have. And I think Martha is going to give a little insight on that. Is this your slide?
It's still yours, but I can do it.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, we're transitioning, and it's a big transition. And, thank you all for staying awake at this time, too. I know this has been a long day, and this can be a dry topic. We've been at this for quite a while with this enhanced assessment grant. And so I'm really fortunate to have such amazing colleagues in the assessment office that I work with. I'm the sole representative on the equity unit that's had the privilege, actually, of working with this team. And I recently transitioned off of the Consortium Council, so I was the former Consortium Council rep, and my colleague Holly Carter it has taken over that role. And since, over the course of these 2.5 years that I've been affiliated with the project, we've done a lot to think about the transition from ELPA to ELPA 21. And so that's really what I'm going to be talking about now, is the planning that we've been doing during that time and where we're at in that process. There's a lot of things that we have to think about when we transition assessment systems, and one of the key considerations for us was as we think about this transition and we look at a multi-year, the multiple years that are involved in that, what are the big things that we have to think about. And one, what we did to really think about the transition from ELPA to ELPA 21 in that first operational year was a couple of key issues that we had to think about, which was student testing and where we're going to double test students. And if we didn't double test students, how do we meet our federal accountability requirements? And so we had a couple of work groups that we convened. The first work group was on these specific topics. And what we did was really lay out the testing transition over this 3 or 4 year time period, but say this is the year we really want you to focus on. And should we double test students in this year? Or if not, then how do we go about making meeting our federal requirements with respect to accountability? The recommendations that came out of that first work group was that we should not double test students. There was a lot of concern about a lot of the double testing that was going on. We did not get a waiver from the federal government to allow even during the field test for students then to take the field test and then not take the normal test. They had to take both. So there was a strong preference by the work group that we not double test. So we moved forward with that recommendation, and ODE then developed a calculation for how we would meet AMA01 in particular, which was one of the measures for Title III accountability that has to do with progress on English language proficiency. We submitted that proposal to the federal government, and that was approved. And then at the end of that work group, we started talking about reclassification and about the fact that we're transitioning to this new assessment. And there always is this period of time where we're not as confident as we would like to be, particular in the cut scores. And so how is it that we could use additional evidence basically to support our reclassification decisions? And so at that time was when we decided we wanted to launch a second work group to talk about then the use of multiple measures for reclassification decisions. And on this slide here, you have the scope of work that we identified for that, as well as the timeline. We proposed initially that we would meet April through July, and we met at that time of 2015, and that we would have some preliminary recommendations on that work by July 2015. We did a lot of work in that work group, but we also realized we had a lot more work to do. And so this slide just kind of summarizes the information or the work that we accomplished during those 4 months of time. But a big recommendation to come out of the group too was we really need to consider this topic a lot longer and a lot deeper. And so how is it that we can conduct some further research on this topic? And so that is where we are at now. So in terms of the next steps on the transition planning, with the multiple measures work group, we kind of put that group on hiatus, and we are launching a research project with Oregon State University. Dr. Karen Thompson at OSU has been instrumental in leading and co-facilitating these work groups. She's going to be conducting that research and has already identified some districts that will be part of that research project. We hope to also hopefully move forward with a classroom language observation tool, if not in this year, then hopefully shortly thereafter, again, as another way for us to use an additional measure to look at how students are performing in the classroom with respect to the new ELP standards. We also recognize that when we've had the first work group that met, that was considering this issue about double testing and about the accountability requirements, that the assumption was at that time that we would have ELPA 21 scores on the same timeline as our current system. And then we found out in fall of this year that that was not going to be the case, that the cut scores were going to be delayed because we didn't have large enough sample size in our field test to have some preliminary cut scores. So as a result of that, we've been working with districts on how we then make some preliminary recommendations on reclassification based upon the use of then additional measures. So it was good that we started thinking about multiple measures for reclassification decisions last spring. We hadn't anticipated not having ELPA 21 scores, but it at least got that conversation going, and we realized that we need to support the districts as they think through this process because it is very new to them. And so we had a webinar on Tuesday to talk about some options for addressing that issue, and then we're meeting with several districts tomorrow to continue that conversation. I will leave it at that. I know that was a speedy update on where we're at. I have my contact information, and Derek's here. I left Kathleen's off since this is her last day, but you're welcome to contact us. And of course, if I don't have the information, I will also confer with my colleagues, Michelle McCoy and Holly Carter, and Derek will as well, so we can get you the information that you need.
When will we have some of the results to take a look at?
So we've been brainstorming then what our timeline is based upon the fact that we're now going to be receiving the standards or the cut scores for ELPA 21 in the summer. We anticipate that we should be able to bring then our recommendations for the cut scores to you for first read in September. So you have a September board meeting, and I think, is it the September or the October one that's a half?
September meeting, they'll be in Hood River, I believe.
Okay. Bringing the cut scores for a first read in September, and then we're keeping our fingers crossed that you would then adopt those cut scores in October. We have a fallback date of December for you to adopt them if you don't adopt them in October, but that really pushes our timeline very close to when we must report to the federal government. So. Hopefully we can anticipate all of your questions and address all of your concerns in the first read so that we will be ready for adoption in October.
We will seek to coordinate with Jessica and others to try to get you as many pre-read materials as possible and try to work through as many questions as you might have ahead of time to use your time very well in September.
More questions? Comments? Well, Dr. Vanderbilt, is that right? Mm-hmm. I was thinking about how it's so appropriately popular to thank veterans of the military for their service, but
It fits.
it's so you've participated during your career in keeping the trains running for kids here, really. Thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it.
I appreciate it.
And Madam Chair, may I echo your
Yes.
congratulations to Kathleen. I started here at the Department of Education in 1997, and Kathleen's cubicle was just around the corner from mine. And I have to tell you, Kathleen was hired at the time because of her visionary leadership. And I think you worked on technology at the time. You were one of the early pioneers of ed technology. And Kathleen's contributions here at the Department of Education and the field go beyond the work that she's currently engaged in. Kathleen worked in the academic area. She was in the Office of Educational Improvement and Innovation, where she truly led innovative work around curriculum development, standards development, the assessment work. So Kathleen's contributions have absolutely been enormous, and I feel truly privileged and honored to have had the opportunity to work with you. So thank you for your service, and I agree with Madam Chair. Your It's too early to retire, but we wish you well, and thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I appreciate it.
Thank you all very, very much. It's been a pleasure, and thank you each for everything you do for each of our brilliant Oregon students. Thank you.
Now go pour yourself a big glass of wine.
Good idea.
On the chair's tab.
Sure. That's why not.
Okay, I think,
Violation of any rule. That is not in violation of any.
You didn't even know the chair had a tab.
We are at our last item, interdistrict transfer, first reading.
And I don't have a PowerPoint.
No PowerPoint? Does your son want to come provide testimony as well?
No.
No?
Emily Nazarov, I'm in the Government Legal Affairs section here at ODE. Chair Summer, members of the board. The rule before you is our interdistrict transfer rule. An interdistrict transfer is the process where a student can move from their resident district to another district. And for interdistrict transfer, both the resident district and the non-resident district have to agree to the transfer. So Senate Bill 709 was passed in 2015 and it impacted our rule in two ways. First, the information that a district can request and consider prior to granting consent. And second, when you can grant consent outside of the usual process. So first, the information that can be requested. Interdistrict transfer is really clear that very limited information is allowed to the district before consent is given. The goal is to make sure that kids have equal access to this process and that districts are not granting or denying consent based on characteristics of the student. And so our rule is really tight about what you can ask for, and so we had to open up and allow districts to ask a little bit more because Senate Bill 709 directed us to do so. The second change is state law allows for certain requests to be treated outside of the usual interdistrict transfer process. Prior to 709, this was limited to emergencies to protect the health, safety, or welfare of the student. And examples of that would be sexual assault, threats against the student's life, or threats of imminent harm. Senate Bill 709 added a provision that said you can do this for student hardship and directed you guys to adopt rules that define what is student hardship. And so I met with a group of superintendents and district representatives to talk about what this would look like. And what you've got before you is our sort of first crack at this rule. What we also heard from superintendents and district representatives was that in addition to defining what is hardship, they would like our rule to give more clarity about how this exemption for safety and hardship works, and make it really clear to districts that if we're talking about this exemption, it means that you step outside of your district policy and handle it in an, you don't have to handle it under the terms of your policy. So that's what this rule is. So the rule has been circulated out. I'm getting feedback from the field that's really valuable, so I would be back in a month with any revisions. Are there any questions?
Were we supposed to have information on what you've gathered so far to define a hardship?
Oh, yes. Was the, in the rule,
That's my fault. I think I
That's
got my
okay.
papers mixed up.
in the rule, what we've done is said, so what I've said is that a student qualifies for a hardship exemption if the student is experiencing circumstances that are continuous or regularly occurring and significantly impact the student's emotional or physical well-being. Examples include domestic violence, bullying, or housing instability. So I intentionally put in a list of specific examples
You
for
know,
this.
I did read those,
Okay.
and now I know. I've mixed my
Okay.
papers up, so
Mhm.
you actually answered
Yeah,
my
and the reason
question.
I put in the specific list because I kind of wanted to throw out to districts, this is what I'm thinking about, and have
Yeah.
them respond to that specifically.
Thank you.
Any more questions, comments?
Do we have any sense of what the effects of this are likely to be?
No, it's kind of we're walking a tight line because originally interdistrict transfer was pretty loose and, you know, and then we had the bill passed, I think in 2011 that said you can't, limited the information that district could request, said you can't discriminate. And so what we're trying to do is give districts the flexibility to handle these type of hardship situations that arise, but not open it up in a way that we completely revert back to the old system. And so, So I will be interested to hear. So far, what I'm hearing back from the field is that they like the direction the rules are right now. I've had some pushback about including bullying as a specific example. One suggestion I had that I thought was actually good was, instead of defining what is a hardship, define what is not a hardship. So hardship does not include the program isn't available at my school, you don't have varsity, I don't know, lacrosse, or things that don't equal hardship.
Yeah.
And then give districts the flexibility to handle the unique circumstances that arise in their community.
No, so these would come to you?
No,
Or-
these would go to the districts. The requests go to the district. Where
Okay.
I come in is the district will call me in and say,
Does this count?
we've had a kid who mom says kid is being threatened. Does this count as a hardship? And I would give them technical guidance on
Okay.
that. But it's the districts that are making the decisions.
Okay, sorry.
Anything else? Are we sure it's only 5:05? Okay.
All right, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I think we are, anything? Oh, look at you. We're done.
Hey.